Chapter 1, Collision. Chapter Text 1. Collision. The collision was deliberate. Astrid was sure of it in the handful of seconds as she slammed into the locker and dropped her armful of books. She stumbled and glared, angry at the shove, then crouched down to collect her belongings, aware of the calls from her friends who were arriving to help her. Heather and Camilla, or Cammy, instantly scooched down by her and helped her tidy up as she cast a scorching glare at the boys who were laughing at her from a little way down the hall. It was the Bad Boy Crew Big Surprise, consisting of Gregory Thuggery Hughes, Darren Dager Oswaldson, Lee Savage Stringer and Hiccup Haddock. The latter a tall, lanky boy with messy auburn hair, stunning green eyes and sarcasm that could melt steel had been the one to barge Astrid aside and was roaring with laughter at her discomposure. "Are you okay, babe?" The bulky, powerful shape of Simon Snotlout Jorgensen loomed over her, his handsome face twisted in a forced expression of concern. As the captain of the football team, he was the prime jock on the senior class and had an opinion of himself to match. He had been pursuing her for years and she had steadfastly refused his advances, often forcefully, but he had thick skin and little imagination, so he was convinced she would one day fall for his dubious charms. "Fine, thanks, Snot," she said briskly, rising to her feet and offering a small smile. "Just the idiot crew again." Snotlout turned, his fists tightening. "Yeah, they'll get theirs," he growled. "Any time, Snotfis." Thuggery laughed. "You bring your bitches along and we can settle it. Name your time and place and we'll be there." Snotlout sneered. Dager laughed. "You'll know," he scoffed and sauntered away, the others laughing as they followed. Astrid frowned. Dager always made her uneasy, his air of only mildly repressed violence unsettling. She could guess he was someone who would do anything and lacked any internal boundaries. And much as she was exasperated by Snotlout's persistence, she didn't want him to get hurt. "Be careful," she murmured. "That one's a lunatic." He gave her an offended look until she added, "And we need our finest quarterback if we want to win the state championship this year." He preened and grinned at her. "Yeah, and you'll be there, won't you, babe? Head of the cheer squad and captain of the team. Sounds like a perfect match." "Yeah. In your dreams," she said, pulling a face. Fortunately, the bell rang and she followed Heather to their first class. Senior year at last. And as class president, Astrid was determined to get the most out of this semester and not let idiots like Hiccup Haddock ruin her year. Oh. He hadn't been able to resist it. She had been a sitting target, distracted as she juggled her books and got ready for her first class. She was a goody-goody, one of the most popular girls in school, and it had been his pleasure to embarrass her on his way in. The boys had appreciated the joke and it had gotten his year off to a good start. The sight of Snotlout threatening them was amusing as well, because they all knew that the jock wouldn't risk getting into a fight with them for fear of jeopardizing his scholarship chances. So the bad boys started the year off with a point in the win column. Hiccup followed the guys as they headed to their lockers. Not that they cared about classes much, but most of them had parents who would make life inconvenient if they truant or were suspended, so they reluctantly separated and headed to their classes. Hiccup slid into math class just before the bell sounded and trudged to the back, ignoring the sarcastic greeting that Mr. Mildew threw in his direction. He sat on the back row, pulling the hood of his green track top up and prepared to be bored. It wasn't that Hiccup was stupid, far from it. Until his mom had remarried, his grades had been heading for a straighter average, but since, well, school assumed less importance and he did the minimum to avoid complications while wasting his attention on causing trouble and hanging around with the worst crew in school. Any dreams he had harbored for the future were long gone, and now all his energies were directed to surviving school and getting the hell out of Burke once it was done. He did have a plan for after school, and for that, he needed a good grade in math, so he reluctantly paid attention. Unfortunately, senior math was taught by a man who hated him, and that made his resolve to do well in the subject difficult. He had been in Mr. Mildew's class the previous year, and the teacher was a sarcastic, irritable man who disliked Hiccup intensely, though the paint bomb in his car last semester probably had something to do with that. "What did I say, Mr. Haddock?" the teacher snapped, and Hiccup flicked his forest green gaze up from his sketchpad. The man was standing with his arms folded, his scrawny shape in the rumpled sport jacket and dark slacks vague ridiculous, topped by a wild crown of grey hair. "A equals root B over C," he said sulkily. The teacher strolled over to glare at him. "Lucky guess," he growled, snatching the sketchpad. "You know, I was surprised that you chose this class out of all the options. Surely there must have been something more suited to your meager talents." Hiccup stiffened. "Hey, I just love your charming and warm personality, Mr. Mildew," he retorted sarcastically. "I really felt it wouldn't be school without the opportunity to hear your dulcet tones." "Be careful, boy," the teacher told him coldly, waving Hiccup's sketchpad in his face. "I'll expel you from my class without hesitation if you step out of line. What have we here?" He flipped through the pages, seeing a selection of beautiful sketches of everything from the view across Burke at dawn to a stray dog. With a smile, he rolled it up and made to go back to his desk. Hiccup lurched up and snatched it back, his eyes flashing with anger. "That's private," he snapped. "Keep your hands off it." "Hand that over," Mr. Mildew commanded coldly. "You can have it back once class is over." "No." Hiccup growled. "It's private." His face was twisted in a scowl, his fists clenched and body angled to protect his book. Mr. Mildew narrowed his dark, mean eyes and glared at him. His face reddened. "Go to see Mr. Treacher," he ordered, grabbing the boy's arm. Hiccup wrenched his arm away, throwing a punch instinctively. The teacher dodged and gripped his wrist, wrenching his arm down. Hiccup almost went feral, kicking out and lashing out with his other arm, screaming, "Get off me!" Mr. Mildew released him as a fist connected with his face and he backed away. "Get out," he growled. "Go to the principal's office." Still shaking with anger, the boy grabbed his bag, shoved his way past the teacher and slammed from the room. From the front, Astrid and Heather watched him in shock. They had never seen anyone lose it so completely in class, and there was an outburst of shocked whispering as Mr. Mildew composed himself and slowly walked towards the board, the look on his face daring anyone else to cross him. Meekly, they turned back to their work. Chapter 2, Flirting with Danger. Chapter text. It wasn't as if he didn't know the way to the principal's office. He had been enough times during the previous years to know the way, but there were plenty of good reasons to delay. So instead, he went to the bathroom and stared at his reflection for a long time while he calmed his breathing and tried to process who he reacted. The pale face with fading freckles, forest green eyes and tousled auburn hair stared warily back. It was the face of a loser, of a nobody. He splashed water onto his skin and then sighed. He couldn't put it off longer. Marcia, the secretary, looked up as he walked in and cocked a well-penciled eyebrow, her plump face moving into a weary expression. "Starting a little early, aren't we?" she asked. "Not even lunchtime on the first day." "A new record, Mr. Haddock." Hiccup nodded and sat silently as far from the door to the office as he could manage, shoulders hunched and head bowed. "I like to challenge myself," he replied sarcastically, keeping his voice low. "He's in and I'm sure he'll be overjoyed to see you," she riposted. He nodded absently, his eyes staring at the floor. She lifted the phone and murmured a few words and then she looked up. "He'll see you now. Go on in." With great reluctance, Hiccup levered himself to his feet and grabbed his bag, then knocked quietly at the door and heard the rough voice invite him in. He squared his shoulders and walked in, quietly heading for the desk. The huge shape of Mr. Treacher glared at him and he stopped by the chair. The principal was a huge man, his jet hair, huge bushy beard and eyebrows all jet black, his eyes dark and face cold and stern. His face twisted into scowl at the sight of the boy in front of him. "What are you doing there, Hiccup?" he growled. The boy flicked up his rebellious green gaze. "Had a disagreement with my math teacher," he admitted. The huge man scowled. "Sir, you need to learn your manners," Mr. Treacher told him gruffly. "Mr. Mildew has messaged me, you were not paying attention in class, you refused to hand over a book you were drawing in and you struck him." His voice was angry. "It's my art notebook. He was going to take it from me." The words were angry and defensive. The principal rose abruptly, walking menacingly towards the lean shape facing him, slump-shouldered and defensive. He extended his hand. "Give it to me, boy," he ordered. Green eyes flicking up briefly, Hiccup fished the book out of his bag and, after a long moment, he handed it over. The principal looked at it for a long moment, knowing the book would be part of the boy's coursework for his art classes that year. Then he deliberately ripped it in half. He walked back to his desk, dumping the wreckage in the bin. "Sit," he commanded. Hiccup stared at him, a betrayed look in his eyes, then perched on the edge of the seat, his eyes inspecting the carpet. "Nothing to say for yourself?" Mr. Treacher sneered. "I don't regret it," Hiccup said coldly. "Your will," Mr. Treacher promised. "I should suspend your, but it's only the first day and I suppose I could put it down to youthful high spirits." "Whatever," Hiccup shot back dismissively. The principal's eyebrows dipped in a furious scowl. "Detention every day for 2 weeks," he growled. "That should calm you down and teach you to think before you act." The green eyes flicked up again, rebellious and verging on hatred. "Remember your place, boy. Sooner you do that, the sooner you will avoid any more unpleasantness." He glared at the boy again. "Get out. Go and apologize to Mr. Mildew and report for detention tonight." Hiccup trudged out without sparing another word or look at the principal, merely tightening his grip on his bag and slamming the door behind him. "Oh." Astrid was astonished to see Hiccup in lunch, fist-bumping with Dagger and Thuggery and shouting a challenge to Snotlout about the fight they had challenged the jocks to. She and her friends were frankly astonished that Hiccup wasn't suspended. He had struck a teacher after all, and though she had heard that he had apologized to Mr. Mildew and had detention and a ton of extra homework courtesy of the math teacher, she couldn't imagine that he wasn't anything other than getting away lightly. The bad boys didn't seem to have learned their lesson and food was flying across the canteen. Hiccup was laughing, joking with his friends and causing a ruckus. The jocks were joining in the food fight and the girls moved further away to avoid any accidental hits. "How did he get away with it?" Cammy asked, her blue eyes wide with shock. "I heard from Marsha he cheeked Mr. Treacher as well," Raquel, or Rough Nut, said. Rough was Astrid's oldest friend, right from elementary school, and her twin, Toby, or Tough Nut, was on the team with Snotlout, Franklin, a husky boy with apparently short legs who was referred to as Fish Legs, and Eric Iretieritson. "How can they allow him to flout the rules? He's supposed to be a senior," Heather said scornfully. "Never a teacher around when you need one," Cammy grumbled, ducking a volley of jelly beans. "Maybe he just doesn't care," Rough added. "I heard. He'll never amount to anything, so keep your focus, girls," Astrid advised them, finishing her drink. "Forget Hiccup Haddock. We need good grades and cheerleading squad trials are tomorrow after school. This is our year to rule the school and we should take full advantage of it. After all, he'll be waiting tables while we're in college." "Did I hear my name?" a teasing voice said, and Hiccup leaned on the edge of the table. His face was mocking. "Swooning over my raw Vikingness." Astrid's eyes flashed in fury. "Never in a million years," she spat. "So you prefer Snotikins?" he taunted her. "Big, dumb and slow." "At least he works," she retorted. "At sport," he shot back. "Running up and down catching a ball, is what you do if you're a dog." "Big deal." Her azure eyes flashed and she glared at him. Burke High's reputation was based on the success of the Burke Vikings, their championship-winning team. The fact they won the state championship more often than not was a great source of pride to everyone in Burke, especially the cheerleading team and their captain. "So what do you work at?" she sneered. "Art." Sarcastic comments. "Floor cleaning." He stared at her, breathing hard. "I thought so. I wouldn't waste my time on a worthless boy like you." His eyes flashed and he leaned close. "Worthless," he breathed. "I'll show you worthless, Miss Perfect. You'll see." And then he flipped her plate, splattering the girls with the few crumbs remaining. She glared after him as he stormed away, her eyes filled with contempt. "Pretty harsh," Heather commented cautiously. "I mean, he wasn't doing anything." "He never does anything," Astrid retorted. "He just disrupts class, makes fun of anyone worthwhile and thinks so much of himself. But he's not worth 1/100th of any of you." Cammy frowned. "You know, he looked pretty hurt when you called him worthless," she commented. "I speak as I find," Astrid replied forthrightly. "And that boy is worthless, until he proves otherwise." "Oh." Hiccup walked home after detention. He had done much of his homework and when he was released, he had of course missed the buses. So he had the walk across town. Burke wasn't large, but it was certainly larger than a village, and it took him the best part of an hour to reach home, a small house backing the river in an unfashionable part of town. The garden was neat and ordered, the drive swept, and a neat Toyota car was parked on the gravel. He trudged up to the front door and let himself in, dumping his backpack by the stairs and walking into the small kitchen. His mother looked up, her forest green eyes the mirror of his. Her tired face smiled, more lines than there should have been clustered under her eyes. A few strands of her grey-streaked faded auburn hair had escaped from her braid as she worked, stirring the pans and cutting bread for the evening meal. "Problems at school?" she asked, her voice sounding tired. "Nothing I can't handle," he said gently, walking up to her and kissing her gently. "Can I help?" She wrapped her arms around her son, shaking her head. "It's almost done," she reassured him, still enjoying the hug. "You work too hard," he reminded her. "Remember what the doctor said?" "You're late back today," she said, sticking to her point and ignoring his. "Detention," he admitted. "Nothing. Darling, I do wish you'd try," she sighed, her face looking disappointed. "You used to work so hard when your father—" He stiffened and pulled away, his face falling into the withdrawn look she had come to know and hate. "Dad's gone," he breathed. "A lot of things went with him." She walked up to lightly lay her hands on his shoulders. "We have to deal with what is," she reminded him. "We have had to move on, my love, and we—" "I smell burning," a voice growled, and she looked up at the voice of her husband. "I don't pay to put good food on the table to have my lazy cow of a wife burning it." She stiffened and Hiccup looked up, standing defensively between her and the door. I am sorry, Alvin," she murmured and turned back to the pans immediately. Her husband stomped angrily into the kitchen, a beer clamped in his hand, and Hiccup backed up a pace, breathing hard. "How was detention?" said Mr. Treacher. Chapter 3, Strays. Chapter text. Hiccup forced himself to swallow the retort he wanted to shout at the man and contented himself with a casual "Oh, hi Al." His mother, Valka, stiffened and he heard the spoon clatter in the pan. "Hiccup," she implored him. "Please show some respect for your father." "He's not my father," Hiccup ground out through gritted teeth. "He's the man you married after Dad went missing. And the man responsible for putting a roof over your ungrateful head and food in your mouth." Alvin Treacher sneered. He lumbered forward and the young man backed up a pace, his forest green eyes widening briefly. He could hear his mother shuffling behind him and he knew he couldn't back away any further. He didn't like leaving her exposed when Alvin was in a mood, no matter how she sided with Alvin against him. "Yeah, about that, Al," Hiccup said, deliberately provocative. The slap snapped his head round and he felt his cheek burning. He stumbled back a pace. "I've been wanting to do that all day." Teacher sneered at the boy. "You know, by rights I should have suspended your—" "Suspended?" Valka murmured in shock. Her eyes trailed over her only child, disappointment bright in the forest green gaze. "Oh, Hiccup, you promised me that you would try not to get into such trouble." "It was his fault." Hiccup protested. "He wanted to take something of mine off me." "Gods, boy, you sound like a 5-year-old. Treacher sneered. "Is this what your father taught you? To be a spoiled brat rather than a man? What, like you? Hitting women and kids?" Hiccup accused him defiantly, expecting the second slap. His cheek was scarlet now. "You would have benefited if your worthless father had taught her a lesson or two," Treacher told him brutally. "If he detangled your eyed a few times, you wouldn't be the worthless troublemaker you is now. You won't amount to nothing, boy." Hiccup swallowed and breathed hard, biting back against the words he wanted to scream at the man because if he said any more, it would get violent, and he had silently promised his father he would protect Valka. And though his father had gone missing 5 years earlier, Hiccup had always tried to keep his word. "Reflects badly on you then," Hiccup said slowly. "You're the principal. If your son can't get a high school diploma, what does that say about your school?" The third slap almost knocked him to the ground and he staggered back. His cheek felt numb and hot with pain, all at the same time. "Says I got nothing to work with," Treacher growled. "Can't make a silk purse out of a sow's ear. You're a stupid, worthless, lazy, defiant brat and I only tolerate you because of your mother. But if you push me much more, boy, you're out on the streets." Hiccup glanced up at Valka, seeing her eyes widen in worry and begin to swim with tears. Defeatedly, he bowed his head and stared at the floor. I apologize, sir. He forced himself to say, the words almost burning his tongue. What were that, boy? Teacher sneered, cupping his ear. I said, I'm sorry, Hiccup said defeatedly. You're right. I am ungrateful. And worthless. I owe you everything. Staring at the floor, he didn't see Alvin move, until he felt the hand around his throat. He choked and clawed wildly at the grip. You better not forget it. Alvin menaced the teen coldly. Next time I hear any sass from your boy, I won't be so generous. And he shoved the boy back. Go to your room. Swallowing, Hiccup cast his mother a worried look, but she gave him a reassuring small smile, and he turned and trudged to the stairs, scrambling up 3 at a time and slamming and locking the door to his tiny bedroom with as much vigor as he thought he could get away with. And then he flung himself onto his bed, burying his face in the thin pillow, his shoulders jerking with ragged breaths. He wasn't crying because that would be weak, but he was angry and frustrated and a little scared. Treacher was cruel, clever and violent and held all the cards. He rolled over to stare at the ceiling and threw an arm across his face, breathing hard. The truth was, of course, that Hiccup and Valka had been in desperate trouble when Alvin Treacher had moved in on Hiccup's mom. His father, Stoic, had vanished with his plane over the mountains 5 years ago, and in the absence of a body or any wreckage, the banks and institutions had refused to accept that he was dead, only missing. And that meant that there was no money, all bank accounts frozen. Their home was taken and they were left with nothing, until Alvin had wooed and married Valka. The whirlwind romance had made the frail Valka happy, and for her sake, Hiccup had gone along with it, trying to get along with his new stepfather. But it soon became clear Alvin's version of happy families was very different to Hiccup's. Alvin had begun to verbally pick at the woman, undermining her confidence, emphasizing her reliance on him and the wretched state of their finances and prospects when he had taken them on. And the fact that her son was a screw-up. He didn't show her what Alvin had done, didn't reveal the burns or bruises or welts he left. He didn't tell Valka of the hours he spent locked in the damp cellar or shivering in the yard. He flinched when she sided with him, pleading with him to get along with his new father, to respond to Alvin's apparent kindness. And he tried to be around when Alvin had been drinking because he had seen bruises on Valka's narrow face and it chewed him up inside. But there was no escape, for Alvin tracked Hiccup's progress at school and made sure that the teen couldn't get away with anything, and any hope, any plan he had was thwarted. And so the boy had felt there was no point in trying. He sat up wearily. He had a granola bar in his bag, grabbed at lunch because he missed more evening meals than he ate, and he chewed through it ravenously, then walked to the window and slid it open. The night was cool and he scrambled out and dropped into the dark yard, silently sneaking to the shed, grabbing a bowl and scooping a bowl full of dried dog food. Checking that no one was watching, he slid through the gate out back and glanced left and right. Then he whistled through his teeth. Immediately, a dark shape sprinted into view. The dog was young, scruffy and thin, a pink tongue hanging from his mouth as he seemed to smile. Hiccup dropped to a knee and felt the dog fling himself against the boy. He started laughing at the thorough licking he was given and he swiped the saliva away. Toothless, I am sure that won't wash out, he chuckled, patting the excited mutt. The black stray, his green eyes bright with excitement, capered excitedly as the boy put the bowl down and wolfed the food. Kneeling by him, Hiccup stroked and patted him as he ate, feeling his heart soar. He had found the stray while walking home from school and had used what little money he had on the mutt, but he had needed to resort to stealing food intended for Alvin's ferocious dog, Screamer. He guessed Alvin wouldn't take well to the theft or to the dog named Toothless because the mutt had lost a few teeth already. But Toothless was literally the only creature that really cared for Hiccup, and he wasn't about to give him up. He rested his head against the dogs as they crouched in the cold night. We're just a pair of strays, Bud, he murmured. And I promise I won't ever let you down. Chapter 4, Trials. Chapter text. The next day, the crew were waiting as Hiccup arrived, cheering and clapping that he had dodged the bullet and escaped suspension. From the other side of the hallway, Astrid and her friends were trying to ignore them and gossip, but the arrival of Snotlout and Toughnut merely ramped up the volume and the taunting by the crew. Hey, losers, Snotlout called scornfully. Got nothing to do? Ah, I forgot, you aren't in anything. All you can do is call names. Well there, Snotfis, you're lucky we're so skilled at it, Hiccup called. What are you looking so cocky about, Fishbone? Snotlout sneered. I heard you were all upset because teacher wanted your little bookie wookie. At least I can read, Hiccup shot back, loud enough for him to hear. What was that? Snotlout growled. Deaf as well as illiterate. Maybe we should tell Coach Rokeby, Hiccup taunted him. At least I'll be on the team. Snotlout shot back. You'll never be good enough. Hiccup cast a look at the others. Dunno, Thuggery commented. Maybe we should come and show you Jocks how it's done. There was a sudden eruption of laughter as Snotlout, Toughnut, Irret, Fishlegs and everyone else openly laughed at them. Can't see why you're laughing, Dagur growled. I'm bigger, stronger and faster than Snotfis here, so why would he make the team ahead of me? Snotlout stopped laughing. One word, grit. Determination. Chutzpah, Guts. That's technically 7 words, Hiccup pointed out. And none of them beat us anyway. Savage added snidely. What are you doing? Hiccup asked them in a low voice. He couldn't see his friends volunteering for and sticking with the school team. Dagur leaned close and draped his arm around Hiccup's shoulders. We're not going to join the team, Dagur growled. We're going to sabotage it. If the best players don't get in, then they'll be ruined and the team loses. He scowled menacingly. No one makes fun of Dagur the deranged. Oh. Can you believe that? Astrid hissed to Heather in lunch. I cannot believe that those troublemakers are going to try for the team. What does it matter to you? The other girl replied, chewing her sandwich. She flicked her jet hair off her face. I mean, you'll be captaining the cheerleaders again, so you'll cheer for whatever team we have. But I want us to have the best team possible. Astrid protested. And I don't believe any of those guys cares 2 spits about football. They'll disrupt the team or play the fool and we'll end up crashing and burning. And the coach will know that, so no way he'll pick any of them to join the team, asked. Cammy soothed her. And besides, we'll have cheer selection at the same time. Heather reassured her. Do you think there'll be any surprise candidates? Ruff grinned. Don't worry, Heather, she shrugged. You aren't getting rid of your 3 blondes. Heather threw an apple at her and Ruff caught it, hefting it back at Heather, missing and hitting Snotlout. The jock leapt to his feet, his fists balled to punch whoever had thrown it at him, and then he saw the girls laughing with Ruff bright scarlet. Snotlout forced a smile on his face and handed the apple back. Here you are, ladies, he oozed. You need to keep your strength up for trials. Cammy grinned. Yeah, you can see why Ruff isn't in the softball team, she quipped and got hit in the face by a banana. Oh. Astrid was almost late for art class, having been held up helping Cammy, Heather and Ruff clean fruit off themselves once they finished their food fight. She slipped in just before the bell, muttering apologies, and took the only free station close to the back of the room. It hadn't been her first choice, but her careers advisor had suggested art would demonstrate a well-rounded portfolio for her college applications, so she had chosen the subject with little enthusiasm. The teacher, Miss Sylvester, was a messy woman with wild graying hair, kindly grey eyes and a penchant for ankle-length skirts and sandals. Her lessons, though, were reckoned to be engaging, enjoyable and always productive. She was softly spoken, very patient and always willing to help any student who wished to improve. Astrid primly fetched out her sketchbook and prepared to listen. Have you all brought your sketches? Miss Sylvester asked. Anyone taking the class had been asked to gather at least 5 sketches over the summer for the semester. Astrid had done hers in the first week of the vacation, determined to ensure that she did not forget to do the homework, and though they were competent, she would be the first to admit they weren't good. She became aware of a hand raised to her left. I, lost my sketchbook, Hiccup said quietly. His eyes were downcast. Astrid stared at him. It was a prerequisite for the class and she prepared herself to see the boy thrown out of another class, but Miss Sylvester sighed. I'm sorry, he added, the tone genuine. I am aware of your standard, Mr. Haddock, so I will overlook the omission this time, she said gently. Collect a new sketchbook and try to be more careful. I will expect 5 sketches by Monday. Lifting his eyes, his face lit by surprise, he swallowed. Thanks, Miss Sylvester, he said in shock and rose, quietly collecting a new book from the cupboard. Astrid raised her hand. Miss Sylvester. I thought you had specified no one was allowed to take the class without providing 5 sketches, she said clearly. Stiffening, Hiccup raised his eyes to stare at her, his hands tightening in anger. But the teacher gently patted the scrawny boy on his tense shoulder and smiled calmly at the blonde girl. That was to judge the standard of the students entering the class, but I am already familiar with Mr. Haddock's standard, she explained easily. Astrid's blonde brows dipped. Miss Sylvester gestured to a beautiful oil pastel picture framed on the wall of the class. Mr. Haddock did that last semester. She walked to a pencil drawing of a young woman. This was from last autumn. And then she walked to a small oil painting of Burke by night. This was done 2 years ago. All of these are Mr. Haddock's work. He is the most talented artist Burke High has had for over 10 years. I know that if he says his book has been lost, it was lost. But it really is none of your business, Miss Horferson. Whether my best student produces his sketches now or in a week is my decision, not yours. Cheeks flaring scarlet with embarrassment, Astrid looked down at her desk, catching Hiccup's scowl from the corner of her eye. He gave her a look which promised this isn't over before turning back to the class exercise. Oh. Astrid was storming out of class, still unreasonably angry when a hand grabbed her arm and held her back. She spun to meet Hiccup's forest green gaze. The boy was angry as he dragged her to the side of the corridor and leaned close. What was that about? He snarled. How do you do it? She snapped back, her eyes scornful. You attack a teacher and any of us would be suspended, but you just get a few days detention. You fail to do the one task we were told was absolutely essential to attend art, and you get a free pass to continue. Just lucky, I guess, he shot back. And what's it to you anyway? Why are you so bothered? Why were you so determined to have me thrown out of art? A tiny corner of her mind asked her the same thing. It was mean and cruel and really didn't make any difference to Astrid, but the bigger part of her was growling at the unfairness of it all. Because you didn't do what you were supposed to do to deserve to be there, she spat back. I have to stick to the rules. Everyone else has to stick to the rules, but not you. So why are you so special? He stared at her, breathing hard. Haven't you heard? He asked with a twisted smile. I'm just worthless. And with that, he shoved past her and walked away. Chapter 5, Tribes. Chapter text. He skipped the next class history because he felt so angry. Little Miss Perfect Astrid Horferson and her goddamned rules. All she cared about was her perfect image, and it was none of her business if he did art or not. The fact that art was the only class he cared about except shop and she had tried to get him expelled just hit him too hard to bear. None of them knew him and no one cares that he had an entire book of sketches for the class, until Mr. Treacher had ripped it to pieces yesterday. He paused and calmed his ragged breathing. No one would care anyway that he needed art and math and physics and shop. That he wanted with all his heart to be an artist, but that he knew it couldn't make enough money, so he had chosen engineering. Chosen something where his mechanical skills would still be of use and where he could make enough money to get his mom away from Alvin and free. He headed up for the bleachers by the sport field. The weather was still warm and sunny and he drew out his sketch pad and stared down over the school. Almost automatically, he flipped a pencil in his hand and began to sketch the school, capturing the play of shadow across the building, the shapes and reflections and textures. And then, just as he was nodding in satisfaction, he heard shouts and saw the football team run out for trials. Detention. He was late for detention, so he threw his gear into his bag and raced for the school, arriving panting into the room and meeting the scowl of the principal as he threw himself into a seat and nodded his apology. He pulled his math book out and began work on the copious homework that Mr. Mildew had set him in payment for his behavior. He knew he should be grateful not to be suspended or expelled, but the work was very hard, well above the level of the class, and it was very testing. Mr. Mildew, as everyone else assumed, Hiccup was stupid because he didn't try. But he was utterly determined to complete the work and show Mildew and everyone he wasn't a total waste of time. He had almost completed the work when the hour of detention was up, but Mr. Treacher laid a heavy hand on his shoulder as the other detainee left the room. You were late, he growled. 10 minutes. So you owe me one more day, boy. Hiccup flicked his eyes up to meet the cold, brutal glare of the principal. Yes, sir, he said quietly. He stood there silently until Alvin finally wearied of the sport and told him to get out of his sight. Suppressing a sigh, Hiccup fled quickly, not daring to answer back, knowing he would hear more of it later. But he knew his friends would be at the trials, so he headed out for the football field and watched the candidates going through their paces. Quietly, he settled down on the bleachers and watched the end of the trials. Despite their protestations to the contrary, his friends seemed to be trying really hard to make the team. And why wouldn't they? Dager was fast, strong and ruthless, savage strong and determined, and thuggery athletic and possessed of a great arm. All of them looked set for glory, except Hiccup. Unable to resist, he threw a few whistles and jeers at his friends and was rewarded with a mouthful of abuse from Dager. He smiled quietly. Dager wanted to prove he was stronger than the current football team members and was locked in battle with Snotlout and Irette, which he was determined to win. Hiccup winced as he took out Irette in a crunching tackle. Way to take him out, Dag! Hiccup shouted, and almost everyone glared at him. Shut up, Fishbone! Snotlout shouted back. Maybe Mr. Haddock wants to demonstrate his own prowess rather than just commenting. Coach Rokeby called. No, I'll pass, thanks. Hiccup replied calmly. Not really cut out for football. I can think of better ways to spend time than throwing a ball around. Any more comments disrupting my trials then, will land you in detention, the coach shouted, and Hiccup scowled. But I'm Olympic class at sarcasm, he muttered, then ducked as a ball was thrown hard at him, just missing him. He grabbed the ball and tossed it back, making a reasonable effort, laughed at hard by Snotlout, Irette and Tough Nut. And Dager also gave a mocking grin. He sighed and sat back on his seat as the girls arrived, making scornful comments as he watched. What are you doing here? Astrid asked sharply. No law against being here, he replied bitingly. I thought you were all supposed to be tossing pom-poms. The girls all scowled, and Heather and Astrid moved towards him. It's easy to scoff when you do nothing, when you can do nothing. Astrid scorned him. He glared at her. So the pom-poms didn't go so well, he scoffed. You're talking to the captain of the cheerleading team. Heather snapped at him. She's the best here. She thinks about doing something, she works hard and she achieves her goals. Unlike people like you, who do nothing, cause trouble and fail all around. Yeah, when was the last time you did anything worthwhile? Cammy scorned him. Or did anything for anyone else? Ruff added. Every damned day, he thought bitterly but forced himself to smile. Well, I made you all feel good about yourselves, perfect little cheerleaders, telling off a bad boy for scorning their poor little boyfriends, he smirked. He stared down at the field. The coach had called them all into a huddle and was giving them one final pep talk. He rose and grabbed his bag. And, my work here is done. Try not to get worn out by all those heavy pom-poms. And he stalked away, bumping past Astrid and taking the steps down 3 at a time. She stared after him. Her animosity had been instinctive, but she knew already that he was a success in art, though that was never publicized. He had completed some great paintings and clearly wasn't totally useless. But she had called him precisely that in front of her friends again when she should have known better. And then she paused. That had been cruel and unworthy of her. She had struck out at a boy to make herself feel better, to reinforce her sense of self-worth and success by undermining and effectively bullying another student. Bullying. That couldn't be right. You couldn't bully Hiccup Haddock, right? The guy had skin thicker than a rhino and a bottomless store of snappy comebacks. Anything anyone said to him just rolled off him. And he didn't care anyway. Or did he? He hated being called worthless. He looked hurt when she had tried to get him expelled from art. And he had been very defensive. Her eyes lingered on the skinny shape, walking away hunched-shouldered and alone. He was staring at the ground as he walked, not looking back or waiting for his friends. And then Cammy called her and they turned back to cheer the prospective team members as they went through their paces for the final time. Chapter 6, Fathers. Chapter text. It was Tuesday, so he went to the workshop in town, the forge, walking in the back and shouting a greeting to the owner, offering half-hearted apologies for his lateness. Swiftly, he stowed his bag and coat and pulled grimy overalls on over his jeans and top before walking into the main work area, almost being deafened by loud music and off-key singing. A single large man was bellowing horribly off-key, singing an old drinking song with words that the teen knew but probably shouldn't. Gobber. There are dogs howling for 3 blocks in all directions. For the love of Thor. Hiccup shouted, and his boss looked up, flipped up his welding visor and cracked a wide grin, showing his metal tooth. He had a peg leg and a metal hook for a left hand, and though he was bald, he had a thick blonde unibrow and a long blonde braided mustache. His blue eyes twinkled at the skinny teen. He had been Stoic Haddock's best friend since elementary school and had always felt like an uncle to the boy. It was no surprise who Hiccup had turned to when he lost his dad. "Laddie. I thought ye wouldn't grace me with your presence today," he said amiably. "You know I like to make an entrance." Hiccup grinned, leaning forward. "Home. The chivvy playing up again. Fuel injector is starving the engine," Gobber grumbled. "Have a look, laddie. You've got away with these." Hiccup grinned, rolled his sleeves up and cheerfully bent to his task. He lost track of time as he stripped the engine back and fixed the fuel injection system. Finally, he stood up, his green eyes looking triumphant. "Try that," he suggested, and the older man lumbered to the ignition and turned the engine over. It roared into life, the purr even and deep. Hiccup tweaked the system once more, then nodded and Gobber switched it off. "Good work, laddie," he complimented him. "You got time for a drink?" Hiccup stared at him, then snatched a look at the time. He gulped and shook his head. "I'm late," he sighed. "Alvin." He paused and Gobber stared at him. "Your mom doesn't suspect?" he asked gently. He sometimes hits her," Gobber Hiccup explained ashamedly. "So I have to protect her. And I can't do that if she is worried what may be happening to me. So whatever he does, doesn't matter. As long as he doesn't hurt her, I can put up with it. He's already promised to throw me out on the day of graduation, so I have to make sure I stay as long as possible, and have a plan so I can get her away from him. Laddie, you need to look out for yourself as well." Gobber said worriedly. "You dinna think I canna see the changes you've gone through since your dad went? Your VE closed down, lost your spark, the boy I knew has gone as well." Hiccup's green eyes flicked up. "He's got me completely trapped," he said in a low voice. "He has my mother dependent on him, and I think she loves him. But he's cold and hostile to me, and in school, he makes sure I'm always on his radar, that every teacher watches me like a hawk. So I gave up, Gobber. There was no way I could win, no way I would ever achieve anything with him on my case. So I do the minimum and rebel against him because it's all I can do. Laddie, I love you like you were my own son, and I hate to see you like this," Gobber said softly. The boy gave a mirthless smile. "Nothing to be done," Hiccup said defeatedly. "No one would believe me anyway. So I just have to carry on." Then he paused. Gobber, can I leave my bank card and book with you? I don't want him to know what I have." "Of course, laddie," the older man said. "And any time you need a place to stay, you know where I am." Green eyes brightened with gratitude. "Thanks, Gobber," he said and hastily left, stowing his overalls and bank book in his locker. But as he trudged across town, all he could think of was that it was only 9 months until he left home and was finally free. Oh. Astrid got in after the trials, already planning her homework assignments. Her mother smiled at her proudly, waving as Astrid set her bag down and walked into the kitchen. "How is my precious daughter doing?" she asked. Astrid smiled. "Oh, just winning the trials and being cheer captain again," she said casually. "Same as usual. As long as you remember what your father said," her mother reminded her, pouring her a glass of juice. "A Horferson is always a winner. He expects you to succeed in all you do, and get a straighter average again this year. This is your last year in school, and then the competition gets so much tougher as you head out of Burke into the wide world. And we both want our only daughter properly prepared." "I know, Mom," she sighed. "I just worry when you make me do things for the sake of college application. Some if the subjects are not my best, Mom. Take art. Giving you a more rounded portfolio, her mother confirmed. But, Mom, I suck at art, she protested. Making me do senior art threatens my average grade. The best thing I could do is drop art and protect my grades. A Horferson never quits, her father said, arriving and kissing his wife tenderly. He kissed Astrid's cheek and stared sternly into her azure eyes. I am certain you will pass the class well. Dad, I am competent at best, she sighed. I'll pass, but not well. She gave her a hard look. I expect you to pass well, Astrid, he told her flatly. You are my only daughter and you will succeed. Feeling her stomach dance with anxiety at the weight of expectation, she nodded. I will do my best, Dad, she said proudly, and then headed upstairs for her shower and homework. Dinner in an hour, her mother called as she reached her room. Then she flung herself into the bed. How could she possibly get an A in art? Her last grade had been a C. She sighed. Despite what her father said, she would quit art before she ever ruined her average with it. Oh. Hiccup was in his room as well, cheek stinging from a brutal slap from Alvin and stomach growling with hunger. His mother had been so disappointed that he had been late for detention and earned extra punishment, and that he had been late home without explanation. If she suspected he had been at Gobbus, she gave no sign. But Alvin had lectured him about responsibility and punctuality, and he had risen to the bait again. The argument only ever had one end. He listened carefully until he was sure Alvin was safely in front of the television before scrambling down into the yard and sneaking the bowl of food out for the waiting Toothless. The dog was astonishingly excited to see Hiccup, and he just crouched by the hound, his hand on the thin back, feeling the vibrations of each desperate mouthful of food. He knew how the animal felt and his stomach rumbled again. Yeah, I know I should do something, but I gotta look out for you, buddy, he murmured. Toothless gave him a solemn lick and he rubbed the harsh coat affectionately. Thanks, Bud, he added. At least someone is happy to see me. The dog turned back to the bowl. Or just the food I bring, he sighed, rising to his feet. Instantly, Toothless was alert and the boy heard steps as well. Panicking, he grabbed the almost empty bowl and the scruff of the dog's neck and dragged him into the bushes behind the back gates. A moment later, Alvin emerged with his huge dog at his heel. He gestured and the brute started sniffing around, following the scent trail towards the concealed boy. He glanced at Toothless in agony, knowing what Alvin would do to the stray. Go, he hissed, and the intelligent green eyes stared at him for a moment, before turning and loping into the woods. Hiccup stared after him, then turned into a snarling face, saliva dripping from huge yellow fangs. He straightened up and backed away, until a hand painfully gripped his shoulder. What are you doing out there? Alvin demanded, his dark eyes cold. Hiccup gave a grin. Getting some air, he replied, though the grip dug ferociously into his shoulder. I told you to go to your room, the older man snarled. Hey, I did exactly what you asked, he protested. I went to the room, and then came out here for some air. You knows what I meant. Alvin threatened him. I know what you said, Hiccup replied smartly, but how could I possibly guess what you meant? Without any hesitation, Alvin slapped him hard, the mark of each finger discernible against his pale cheek. I've been wanting to do that all day. Alvin growled. Head spinning from the impact, Hiccup didn't even struggle as he was dragged back into the yard. Glad to help, he forced himself to say. Alvin more or less threw him across the yard, his foot skidded on some mud and he slammed to the ground. Now, there's no one to see and no one to interfere, so let's sort this out, man to man, Alvin said in a soft, menacing tone. You want a shot at me, Hiccup? The boy scrambled to his feet and backed away. He could backchat and sass all he wanted, but the cold hard fact was that Alvin could beat him to a pulp without even trying. And he seemed itching for the opportunity. No, he murmured, feeling the shed at his back. He was trapped and could feel his heart pounding as Alvin closed. I didn't catch that, boy, he growled. I said no, Hiccup snapped back. Gods damn it, do you want a letter as well? The fist that met his middle was like an iron bar and he groaned as the air was crushed from him. He doubled up before a hand grabbed his hair and painfully dragged him upright. Another crunching blow this time had him collapsing to the floor, where a hard kick smashed into his middle again. Bowed forward, he literally didn't have the breath to resist as Alvin pulled him up and slapped him again, before another punch crushed the remaining air from his body. A final kick to the stomach had him curled up on himself, struggling for air and feeling his vision fade. Alvin stood over him for a long moment before grabbing his hair and dragging him to his feet. The pain cleared his head a bit and he stumbled but stayed on his feet. Alvin's grasp closed brutally around his arm and he hauled the boy unceremoniously into the kitchen. "Oh," hiccup. The disappointment in his mother's voice was painful to hear, especially once Alvin carefully added. "Found him out back. Little bastard decided to disobey me." The flash of sorrow in his mother's forest green gaze was enough to make him want to apologize, but not to Alvin. Never to Alvin. Hurting all over from the beating, cold, hungry and still light-headed, Hiccup didn't even have the strength to protest at her final words. "Why can't you get on with your father?" Chapter 7, Abstract. Chapter Text. The days passed and Hiccup felt himself grow more frustrated. His friends had all joined the football team and while Dager was still promising to wreck the team's chances, he and the others were going to training and seemed to be enjoying training and the company of the other jocks. Alvin was riding his ass and he had accrued 3 more days of detention for insubordination, otherwise known as General Hiccup Sass. Art was his only haven, where he didn't need to pretend not to care that he was considered worthless by everyone and where he was treated like a normal human being. Miss Sylvester went out of her way to encourage him and he had responded by producing the requisite 5 sketches 2 days after he had received his new book. Astrid glanced over them as the teacher flicked through with a smile and had gaped as she had seen the school, a black dog, the team practicing, a blonde man with a very ornate moustache and herself all expertly captured on paper. She had snatched at the book as soon as she saw her image. "How dare you draw me," she snapped. Hiccup glanced at her in amusement. "I wasn't aware your image rights were protected," he teased her. "If you think I want some scrawny troublemaker stalking me too." She began in a rage but Miss Sylvester cut her off abruptly. "Miss Horferson. I will not tolerate this kind of abuse in my class," she scolded her. Astrid's cheeks flamed with embarrassment. "But how could he draw me if he hadn't been stalking me?" she asked angrily. "I've been in your classes for years." Hiccup protested. "I drew you from memory." There was a moment of silence as Astrid glared fiercely at him. "Don't," she said tightly. "I don't want you looking at me or drawing me." "Creep," she added silently. Breathing hard, Hiccup nodded. "Get over yourself," he scoffed. "Why should I want to look at you? If there was a prize for being vain and up your own ass, you'd have no contest." "Enough," the teacher snapped. "I think we've wasted more than enough time on Miss Horferson's wounded sensibilities. Now, abstract views of the school. You may choose a view and sketch, crayon or paint but be back by the bell." As soon as they were dismissed, Hiccup had grabbed his bags and raced from the class, heading out to the bleachers to gaze across the school and the sports field. Grabbing his book, he had already sketched the outline when Astrid and Ruff arrived to start their sketches. Grumbling that he had occupied the best spot, they settled close to him and began to chat, not helped by Cammy who was supposed to be in study hall but had seen them wander out from her desk, bored arriving 5 minutes later. Trying to ignore them, the boy continued his drawing until there were 10 minutes left and it was obvious that neither of the girls had drawn a thing. "Is your drawing so abstract that it doesn't actually exist?" he asked them shortly after they had been laughing and giggling so much it had broken his concentration. He erased the mistake he had made, deep indigo pastel smeared on the side of his hand where he had rubbed the color away. "Sorry, some of us are actually trying to do our work." Astrid flushed, casting him an unfriendly look at the reminder she had allowed herself to become distracted and not complete the assignment while Hiccup Haddock actually had. She blinked and a look of horror covered her face, an F would really bring her grades down. She stared at the school and then at him in sudden dismay. "Oh crap," she murmured. I, quick, how do I do a drawing in 10 minutes? He looked at her in shock. "You asking me, miss? I'm so perfect I want you cut from class," he asked her sarcastically. "And why on my god should I ever want to help you?" Because I am really asking you for your help," she said urgently. "And why should I ever want to help you?" he repeated. "Please," she asked softly. I can't fail." He stared at her coldly. "Maybe it would be a good lesson for you to learn," he suggested shortly. Maybe you would learn to consider how it feels for everyone else. My parents would be so disappointed, she begged him, to the shock of her friends. I have to maintain a straighter average. Asked. Camille murmured, surprised, but Hiccup inspected her closely. There was a genuine plea in Astrid's white sky-blue eyes. Hiccup snapped his book closed and rose. Hardly my concern, he told her coldly. As I said, it would be a good lesson for you to learn. I'm sorry, she called as he turned to bounce down the seats. He froze. What? I am sorry, Astrid blurted out suddenly. You're not worthless. You're really good at art. I was unfair to you. He lowered his head for a moment, then strode back up to her, grabbing her sketchbook and her pencil and swiftly outlining the vista on the paper. Then he frowned and divided the picture up in blocks that still gave the illusion of the school. He threw the pencil and book back at her. Fill in the blocks, the wilder colors the better. Simplest abstract technique, but at least you'll have something to hand in if you're quick at coloring in, he told her, slinging his bag over his shoulder and bouncing carelessly down the steps to amble back towards the school. Astrid stared after him and then grabbed her pastels and hastily filled in the color blocks, astonished that such a simple technique produced such a quick result. She grabbed her books and sprinted back to class, arriving as the bell sounded. Miss Sylvester looked up as she panted in and handed her book in. Just in time, she said with a smile, flipping the book open and glancing at the image. Home. Much better than your previous efforts, Miss Horferson. You shall all get your books back tomorrow. Dismissed. Astrid breathed a sigh of relief as she rose, and then she caught Hiccup's expression. He was smirking at her. And then she realized he had something on her now. Chapter 8, Mom Time. Chapter text. As the weather got colder, Hiccup felt more frustrated. Somehow, Mr. Treacher continued to find reasons to keep him in detention, and he found himself isolated from his friends by continual detentions. Though Dager, Savage and Thuggery were his friends, he couldn't expect them to wait for over an hour every day after school for him to get out, and though he made the efforts to meet up with them afterwards, he felt himself getting pulled away from them. They continued in the football team, and the first couple of matches had been successful. And though they remained antagonistic to the Jocks, the bad boy crew seemed to be enjoying the admiration of the school and the training, both of which excluded him. Astrid continued to blank him, occasionally making snide comments and laughing at him, and he was feeling more and more angry at her. He had saved her ass out of nothing more than an impulse born of her apparent desperation at not wanting to disappoint her parents. That was one thing he could understand, not that he cared what Alvin thought, but every time his mother looked disappointed, it tore him a little more. It had been the human thing to do, to help another person, not that it had earned him 1 second more of consideration from Astrid or her friends. And the knowledge that Miss Perfect didn't have it as easy as he thought still didn't give her any right to lord it over him. He put more hours in with Gobber than he did usually because he needed to stay out of the house as long as he could, and he desperately needed somewhere that he was actually welcome and wanted. He was already a skilled mechanic, and Gobber mentored him as he had when he was a young boy, ensuring the young man continued to develop his experience and skills. The money was all carefully saved towards his escape from Alvin, and he contrived to move Toothless to the garage. Gobber had been sarcastic, but he had recognized that the dog was the only thing Hiccup actually had, and for the lad, he had offered the dog shelter. In return, he found that the mutt was friendly and a good guard dog as well. It meant that Hiccup had to drop by daily to feed and exercise the dog, but that infinitely preferable to risking stealing food off Alvin and facing the angry man or his savage dog. And even a few moments of daily Gobber was enough to bolster his spirits. Back at home, there was more friction since he was always late back, and his evenings settled into a dull routine, being grilled by Alvin when he returned on why he had been out late, where he had been and who he had been with. Each time, Hiccup had refused to answer or shot back a string of sass, earning him a shouting at best but usually a slap or 3 and banishment to his room. Every time he slammed upstairs, he had heard Alvin snarling abuse about his behavior and how disappointing he was, and each time, he had heard his mother's soft voice agreeing with the brutal assessment of his deficiencies. So he tried not to listen as he sat on his bed, completing his homework and wishing that his father was still alive and that he didn't have to stay with Alvin. But he was more concerned because his mother's health had deteriorated. Valka had been frail for years, but her health had declined since the loss of her husband and the stress that had ensued. Hiccup had done everything he could to protect her, but he knew she was stressed by the marriage, by Alvin's continual undermining and his insistence that she cleaned the house from top to bottom every day and had his meal on the table at 7 precisely every evening. She had lost weight and her eyes were shadowed even after a night's sleep. She had a persistent cough that Alvin wouldn't allow her to see the doctor for, telling her that she merely needed more fresh air, exercise and fruit and vegetables. Watching her, Hiccup knew that wasn't the case. On a Saturday, when Alvin had gone out and Hiccup had been left to clean the yard and drive, he had made his way into the kitchen, his cheeks red from the cold and hands freezing. Valka was bent forward over the sink, coughing and hacking. She was struggling for breath and the boy had raced to her side, catching her shoulders and gently holding her until she regained her breath. She glanced up, pale and exhausted, her dull green eyes lighting a little as she saw her son. "Mom, are you okay?" he asked her worriedly. She nodded dumbly. "I'm fine, I just need to push through this," she sighed, accepting the glass of water he handed her. "Mom, we both know that's not going to help," he reminded her gently. "Your doctor said if you had further problems, you needed to rest and have antibiotics if the cough returned or worsened." "Alvin says it will be fine, I'm just making a drama out of it," she said with a little laugh. "And when did he get his MD?" Hiccup smirked, then sighed, seeing his mother's face drop into a frown. "He's your father," she began, and he shook his head violently. "Mom, he's not," he snapped. "Gods, my father went missing 5 years ago and no one can replace him. If Alvin was as super as you keep saying, he would understand that. And he would understand you need to be checked by your physician and get the meds you need." "I'm just stressed," she retorted, her tone a little harder than he was used to. "And you're stressing me out, Hiccup. Your constant arguments with Alvin, always late, always rude, always disruptive, never pulling your weight." He recoiled, his forest green gaze hurt by the accusation. He swallowed and took a shuddering breath. "I have a right to see my friends and I don't want everything I do and everyone I see picked apart by the principal of my high school," he retaliated tightly. "Can't you understand, Mom? I don't need him riding my ass at home as well as at school. I need to have time with my friends, and I won't have any if they realize who he is or if I tell him about what I do out of school." "Hiccup, are you getting into trouble?" his mom asked, turning to face him. Her face was really pale with pink spots on her cheeks as her only color. "Mom, I am 17 and I want to hang with my friends," he sighed, staring at her with concern. "I don't need my high school principal lecturing me every evening that I'm wasting time and should be doing something productive with my life. Can't you even remember being a teen? Spending time with friends. Going out and messing around. Having fun. You need to learn other things too, darling," she sighed, raising her hand to gently stroke his cheek. "Maybe you should get a job." He instinctively glanced around to check Alvin was nowhere nearby, even though he knew the man was out. "I have a job," he told her quickly. "Had for years." Her eyes widened. "Gobber, remember? I help him in the garage and he gives me some money sometimes." Her eyes widened in shock. "Then where?" she began. "Safe," he told her softly. "I'm saving, not spending it on drugs or anything like that. So if you need to see a doctor, I can pay, never fear." She looked relieved then began coughing again. He sighed and steered her to a seat in the living room, settling her on the couch. "Say, I'll make you a nice hot coffee and do your cleaning. How's that sound?" She gave him a wan smile, a flash of the woman he recognized briefly appearing. "Thank you, darling, but what about your chores?" she asked in a worried voice. He stiffened but gave a small smile. "No sweat," he told her calmly. "You get a rest, Mom. I'll be back in a minute." By the time he returned with a milky coffee, she had fallen asleep, he breathing harsh and irregular. He gently placed the drink by her and pulled a rug tenderly over her frail shape. Quietly, he kissed her forehead and then turned back to doing her chores, on alert for her intermittent, harsh coughs or the return of Alvin. It didn't matter that he was due to be working with Gobber that afternoon or hang out with his friends that evening or that Alvin would literally give him hell for neglecting his own tasks, all that mattered was that his mom rested and that she trusted him. And as long as she hadn't been turned against him by Alvin, he could endure everything the man dished out. Chapter 9, Saturday afternoon. Chapter text. He finished Valka's cleaning mid-afternoon and he grabbed his jacket, some decent clothes and headed out. His chores were unfinished but he had no intention of wasting any more time on Alvin's regime. His first port of call was Gobbas, where he had to apologize for not showing up. After a very enthusiastic welcome from Toothless, Hiccup had fed the dog and played with him for a good few minutes before finally screwing up his courage to go inside. He was kicking himself for feeling trepidation and had to force himself to lift his chin and walk in confidently, but as the wall of noise hit him and the sheer chaos in the garage swirled around him, the magnitude of his truancy hit him. He sighed and walked towards Gobber, anticipating an earful from the boss. As expected, the older man was sarcastic and grumpy, but the mute plea in Hiccup's green eyes softened his anger somewhat. "Ye could nae ha rung me?" he asked shortly. Sighing, Hiccup rubbed the back of his neck self-consciously. Don't have a phone, and I don't wanna ring you from home, because I really don't want Alvin to know about you. And he has an itemized bill, so he would ask who made the call and who it was to. He mumbled as Gobber stared, then grabbed his arm and hauled him to the lockers at the back. "Laddie, what aren't ye telling me?" he demanded, and the teen pulled his arm free. "Nothing you need to know," he sighed. "Mom's not well and she won't go to the doctor because Alvin doesn't want her to. So I did her chores and that's why I was late. You knew today's my busy day," Gobber told him shortly. "And I need someone reliable. We've work coming out of our ears. If you can't make it, Hiccup." The boy's face paled. "Gobber, no. This was a one-off, please don't fire me," he begged softly. I need the job and I." The big man stared in shock at the naked desperation and caught his shoulder firmly. "Relax, laddie. I'm not about to fire my best worker," he reassured him quickly. "But if ye canna make Saturday, could ye do Sunday? We can get the cars fixed and start the week wi' a clean slate." The relief on Hiccup's face was like the sun coming out from behind a cloud and he nodded urgently. "Gods, Gobber, that's perfect," he sighed. "Then I can help Mom and work with you." He gave a shuddering sigh. "I just wish I could get her away from him. Laddie, you know, if it all gets too much, there's a couch you can sleep on in my apartment." Gobber checked with him. He nodded and gave a small smile. "Thanks, Gobber," he sighed, "but I have to stay with Mom as long as I can. Maybe I can persuade her to leave with me when I'm kicked out. I know I can earn enough for a small apartment and food. And maybe we'll be able to finally get Dad's money and we can afford all the medical care Mom needs. The offer's there, if you need a night away," Gobber reminded him. "Now." He shoved his real hand into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled note. "Go and buy yourself a phone, laddie. Honestly, you may be the only teen in Burke without a cell." Hiccup shrugged. "Got better things to use my money on," he admitted. Gobber grinned and shoved the money into his hand. "Well, I wanna be able to get hold o' my favorite godson," he told the young man, and Hiccup sighed. "Thor, don't let anyone at school ever hear that," he sighed, but there was a small smile on his lips. Gobber swatted the back of his head affectionately but felt a shimmer of dismay as the boy ducked and cringed slightly. Visibly forcing himself to untense, Hiccup smiled, his green eyes sparkling, and turned to the door. "Thanks, Gobber," he said cheerily and slid out, fussing Toothless and taking the dog for a walk into town, buying a collar and leash at the pet store to replace the rope he was using before stopping at a store and buying the cheapest phone that would do all he needed it to, then topped it up with credit and set it up in the store. Finally, he bought a large bag of dog food and manhandled it back to the garage. Toothless polished off a bowl of food and a bowl of water before settling down on the shabby blanket that Gobber had found him at the back of the garage. After phoning Gobber to give him his number and giving the older man a huge hug of gratitude, he set out again, this time to meet with his friends. It was already getting dark when he found them in the mall, hanging around the stairs, and he greeted them with a grin and a blizzard of high fives. The guys had been waiting for him and they were soon messing around, laughing, joking and drinking sodas. Savage and Thuggery stole skateboards off a couple of younger kids and soon they were messing around and racing round the mall. There were a lot of dirty looks and most people were trying to avoid the rowdy teens. Dager stole them a handful of cookies from the bakery and they ran off, laughing, though Hiccup was starting to get concerned. The guys were far wilder than usual and he really didn't want to get in trouble with the cops. That would get back to Alvin and may make his life even more troublesome. And then they found the others, sitting at a couple of tables at the mall cafe, and they took the adjacent table, turning the chairs round and starting to banter with the jocks. It was obvious that there was no love lost between Dagger and Snotlout, and the two immediately started on one another. Can't those idiots just go away? Heather sighed through her teeth, rolling her eyes. Astrid nodded. Apart from incessant flirting, the gang had been enjoying themselves, hanging around and chatting, until the bad boy crew had arrived. Suddenly there was a whole heap more aggression as Snotlout and Irette were arguing with Dagger, Savage and Thuggery. Even Cammy was joining in, and the twins were egging them on. Astrid cast Hiccup an unfriendly glare, and he glared back. "Yeah, they always turn up where they're not wanted," Astrid commented. "It's bad enough that we have to put up with them at school, without them ruining our day." "No one's keeping you here," Hiccup chipped in with a grin. "You can always go elsewhere." "But I think the guys are enjoying a bit of banter." "Gah. You would think like that. But we were having a good time until you turned up." Astrid's tone was sharper than she had intended, and she saw his face tighten just a little. Then he forced a grin on. "I'd have thought you were too busy being perfect and keeping mommy and daddy happy," he sneered. "Well, at least I have parents who care," she scoffed. "Yours never attended parent evening the last 3 years." He looked at her, suddenly shocked. "At least one of them did, every damn time," he thought, but bit his lip. "How would you know?" he asked tightly. "My mom used to know your mom, and everyone could recognize Stoic Haddock," she spat back. "My mom hasn't seen yours for 4 years. "No, well, my dad's been busy being dead, and mom is sick and dependent on a manipulative bastard who never lets her out of the house unaccompanied," he thought bitterly, but he forced a humorless smile on his face. "Yeah, well, sucks to be me," he shot back sarcastically. "Not everyone can have parents who care or who can make it. Glad yours are so caring, Miss Perfect. But next time you've been so stupid as to talk all through lesson and are gonna fail, I'll enjoy watching you." He stopped himself from saying any more, turning away and folding his arms. Heather rolled her eyes. "That was pretty low," Heather commented, casting Hiccup an unfriendly look. Astrid stared at him. She had been surprised at how quickly he annoyed her and how much she wanted to make him back off. Why? Because he tripped her first day of school and made her lose her dignity for a few moments. Because he managed to get away with breaking the rules when she never even arrived late in her entire school career. Or because she had been forced to grovel for his help and he had given it. Then she looked up as Snotlout leapt to his feet and squared up to Dagger. "Okay, you're on," he growled. "Car park now." Astrid blinked. "What's going on?" she hissed to Cammy. "The jocks and the bad boys have agreed to a fight back of the mall." "What?" she hissed back. "Yeah, we're going now. Winner gets to hang with us." Ruff hissed. Astrid's eyes popped wider. "What?" she repeated. "We're not some prize in a fairground store. And I'll hang with whoever I want, not who wins some stupid fight." "Oh, come on, Astrid. Don't be so miserable." Ruff sniggered. "We gotta and support my idiot brother." Astrid stared. "Yeah, they're all fighting, even him." And she gestured at Hiccup. Chapter 10, Fight. Chapter text. Hiccup started as Dagger grabbed his arm. "You are with us, aren't you?" he hissed. Blinking in surprise, he nodded. The guys were his friends, and friends stuck together no matter how stupid they were being. Not that there was any hope of not being with Dagger, though he was supposed to be his friend. He guessed the other teen would punch him as soon as look at him if he refused to help out. But being part of a brawl with 7 football players was his vision of hell, because though he was taller than he had been, he was still skinny and lithe, but nowhere near as strong as they were. "Of course," he murmured. "You know I've got your back." "But, what are we doing, Dag?" "We're gonna beat their asses." Dagger grinned, jerking his head towards the door, where Snotlout, Irette, Toughnut and Fishlegs were already heading. "Again, why?" Hiccup asked thoughtfully. "I mean, much as I love the chance to get my ass kicked, this is crazy." "Hello, deranged, right?" Dagger grinned. Hiccup nodded. "And the fight?" he asked. "Come on, Dag, this isn't you. What are you really after?" "Apart from a few days off school," he replied. Half the team suspended, that idiot Snotlout eating his words, maybe getting off with Cammy. Hiccup's eyes popped. Or the Ice Queen. W.H. Astrid, he guessed. Dager gave a leer that made Hiccup feel unsettled as the auburn-haired boy followed the jock with a slightly defeated slump of the shoulders. The girls were following as well, with Cammy, Ruff and even Heather jogging alongside the jocks, launching an impromptu cheerleading section for their boys. Only Astrid was hanging back. Hiccup stole a glance at her. I guess it would loosen her up a bit, he said dubiously. Yeah, being suspended would certainly stop Prim Miss Perfect, wouldn't it? Dagger grinned. Maybe she'd realize she wasn't so special. Hiccup stared at the blonde girl and saw her expression. She looked alarmed. Maybe he conceded and swung out of the main door by Dager. Trailing behind them, Astrid was seeing how she could get out of this. She was alarmed because she knew her parents would go crazy if they found she had been involved in a public fracas. She glanced around and the only person who didn't seem to be completely enthusiastic was Hiccup. As Dager jogged forward, he trailed back and she accelerated towards him, wondering why he didn't look so keen. It honestly surprised her. She would have thought he would have been overjoyed at the prospect of causing all manner of chaos, but he looked almost scared. She drifted closer to him and his expression closed to one of exasperation. I don't need another lecture from Miss Perfect, he smirked. She scowled at him. I'd have thought you'd be aching to get fighting and cause some more trouble, she accused him, but he sighed. Yeah, because I love being hit, he told her sarcastically. Have you seen those other guys? They are all built and I'm a twig. And yeah, my strengths are sarcasm and sass, not brute strength. So I'm gonna get my ass handed to me on a plate. I'm sure you'll enjoy that. She opened her mouth and then shook her head. I have no feelings one way or the other, she said primly. I just actually want to be somewhere else. You and me both, Hiccup sighed, lengthening his stride. Her anxious face contrasted with Dager's unsettling look and he sighed. She really didn't want to be here and he guessed he would regret what he was going to say. Look, stay away from the mall, closer to the road, so if anyone turns up, you can vanish quicker. She stared at him and he caught the disbelief in her face. Fine. Whatever. Stay by the mall and be the first one a guard grabs. All the same to me. And he walked away, speeding up to join his friends as they headed away from the door to the south parking lot, a poorly lit and thinly parked space. The guys squared up against one another and the girls stood away to one side with Astrid right at the edge, closest to the road. Dager grinned, raised his arm and charged. Immediately, Snotlout, Toughnut and Irette raced towards the others, with Savage and Thuggery following their leader. Fishlegs gave a less than enthusiastic whimper and ran straight at Hiccup, who backed away, raising his hands urgently. Fishlegs. Hi. I'm sure you don't want to do this any more than I do, so maybe we can just talk this out, he suggested really fast, but Fishlegs hit him at chest height and flattened him with an OOF. Hiccup managed to roll away, but the husky boy was almost as quickly up, surprisingly light on his feet and fists swinging. Hiccup dodged back and paused, then ran forward, sweeping the other boy's legs away with a skilled move that Gobber had taught him. As Fishlegs went down, Hiccup punched him hard in the face with an apology, then scrambled away as the larger boy scrambled up, but the auburn-haired boy was off and running, dodging through fights, bodies flying and people rolling on the ground, grunting, punching and shouting insults. The girls were cheering and egging them on as a hand grabbed Hiccup's ankle and he landed on his face. Where are you going? Snotlout snarled, hauling the skinny teen closer by the ankle. Anywhere but here, meathead. Hiccup told him, kicking and trying to get away. He managed to land a kick on Snotlout's shoulder and scramble away, until a hand snagged the back of his jacket and hauled him back, into an iron-hard fist. Snotlout grinned as he staggered back, but Hiccup shook his head and grinned. Is that all you can do, Snotfis? He sneered, watching the bigger teen turn puce and lunged at him like an enraged bull. He swiftly gripped Snotlout's wrist and twisted as his dad had taught him years earlier. Snotlout gave a pained cry and whined. Ow! Let go, he protested. That's not fair. Sorry, not sure there are rules in this thing, he scoffed. He heard steps close and ducked as Irette punched at him, watching the jet-haired young man punch Snotlout in the face. Result. Thanks for joining our team, Irette. But the powerfully built senior turned and grabbed Hiccup, punching him a glancing blow across the cheek, jamming his heel into the soft inner part of his ankle and foot. He watched Irette bellow and release him, as Dagger hit him from behind and the two powerful boys rolled, trading punches and insults. Hiccup scrambled up, a hand to his bleeding lip, and saw Fish Legs running for him. There was a bruise on his face and he stared in shock. He had never hit someone on purpose before and he had just done it on instinct because the other boy had jumped him. Snotlout deserved his because he had picked on Hiccup for years, but Fish Legs had always been fairly neutral. But now he looked bigger, stronger and mad, and Hiccup already had enough huge strong people mad at him. He ducked behind a bench and tried to keep it between himself and the husky boy, then Fish Legs hopped over and leapt over at Hiccup, but the skinny boy dodged away lithely and skipped past a flailing leg that brought Fish Legs down. And then he heard cries behind them. More guards ran out, having seen the fight on the CCTV, shouting and grappling with the scuffling teens. Hiccup glanced over his shoulder and sprinted away, finding a car about 20 yards away and ducking down behind it, breathing hard and hoping the security were concentrating on the others who were there in their grasp rather than chasing escapees. He peeked around the fender as Astrid appeared at his side, also breathing hard as she hid from security. The security had rounded up all the others including the girls and were giving them all a serious talking to, and there was another shape there as well, a huge bearded shape that had his heart sinking and stomach fluttering with fear. Improbably, Alvin was there, lecturing half his football team and the senior cheerleaders for participating in a brawl. Astrid stared as he slid down to sit on the ground, staring into the darkness and going very pale. "Are you okay?" she asked unthinkingly, and he shook his head, jerking a thumb behind him. She peeked round and saw the principal, staring her way. He frowned and began towards them. "I think he saw me," she hissed. He rolled his eyes and swallowed. "I'll run that way, and then, when he's after me, you run straight down to the main street and go home," he said quickly, seeing her anxious face. She had never been in trouble, and though he guessed it would do her good, something told him she was incredibly nervous of upsetting her parents. "Tell your parents you left when the others decided to go and have a fight, that you walked home, now be ready." He sprang to a crouch, stole a look, then ran determinedly to the left. As predicted, Alvin Treacher bellowed and he just laughed and ran harder, making sure the principal and the remaining security guard sprinted after him. Astrid paused, then dashed the short distance to the road and ran at full pelt almost to the next intersection, Stitch cramping her side. She glanced back, and through the trees, she could see Mr. Treacher holding a struggling shape. Mindful of his words, she put her head down and began the walk home, painfully aware that this was another one she owed Hiccup Haddock. Chapter 11, Grounded. Chapter text. He would be lying if he said he wasn't scared because Alvin had such a tight grip on his arm that he thought would completely cut off the circulation and was sure to leave bruises. And his stepfather was mad beyond words, which mean Hiccup's reasonable afternoon was about to go to hell as soon as they got home. Alvin had been in the mall and had probably been looking out for Hiccup since he knew teens hung around the mall, but he had overheard the security guards racing towards a fight in the car park and had followed, suspecting it may have been some of his pupils. He hadn't expected to see the core of his football team engaged in a brawl with each other, with much of the senior cheerleading team also egging them on. In fact, the only faces he was missing were Hiccup and Astrid. Hiccup he would have expected, as his troublemaking friends were there and Astrid's closest friends were also among those detained. So it had been a welcome bonus when he had spotted a teen hiding behind the car, and what a surprise, it had been the missing boy. Oh, Alvin had enjoying running him down and tackling the skinny teen to the concrete, knocking the air out of him and helping himself to a vicious slap before he hauled the boy up and dragged him back to the others. The remaining teens had been sullen when the principal had faced them and lectured them on the seriousness of their actions. The girls had started to look upset, and even Snotlout had paled as he realized this could have compromised his chances of a scholarship. Alvin had watched with some satisfaction they were taken back to the security office for their parents to be called, mentally noting they were all having detention when they got back to school, or maybe suspension. He didn't care what action their parents took because he already had his own actions planned. "I'll take this one, oh me life's close to me and I know his mother," he volunteered gruffly, feeling Hiccup stiffen and try to pull away. "He'll get home safely." The mall security were more than happy that he was taking care of one of the teens, leaving them with only 10 to deal with, and he was a pillar of the community, after all. So he frog-marched Hiccup out of the mall, more or less throwing the boy into the passenger seat, then paused before walking round to the driver's side. As Hiccup immediately reached for the door the second they moved away, he turned to glare at the boy. "Do you want them to know you're me son?" he said softly. Hiccup stared up at him and froze. "What?" he asked shortly. "Do you want someone to mention to your friends that you live with me, boy?" Alvin leered. Hiccup stiffened. While Alvin really didn't want to admit his stepson was the notorious troublemaker, it would be infinitely more damaging to the boy to reveal the connection. He would go from cool bad boy to pariah in an instant. "You're not my father," Hiccup said tightly, staring up at the man. "You open that door and get out, and come Monday, everyone knows," he threatened. Pausing, Hiccup lifted his hand and placed it back on his lap as Alvin walked calmly round and squeezed his large bulk into the driver's seat. He closed the central locking and started the engine, then moved away. Hiccup sat sullenly in the passenger side, not meeting Alvin's eyes as the big man drove carefully. "You haven't finished your chores," Alvin said grimly. Hiccup stared out the windshield and sighed. "Nah, decided I wanted the day off," he lied. Alvin's knuckles whitened appreciably on the wheel. "You live for free in me, I don't think it's unreasonable to expect you to pull your weight," Hiccup, Alvin growled. "And now you're caught brawling." "Actually, I was hiding because my friends were brawling and I didn't want to get caught," he mumbled. Alvin gave a gruff laugh. "So the bruising on your face were from what?" he growled. Hiccup shook his head. "Must be hallucinating," he mumbled. "Whose idea was it, boy?" "You tell me and I'll not ground you," Alvin said seductively. Staring at the street lights flashing by, Hiccup remained quiet. He wouldn't betray his friends. "You know your mother ain't gonna be pleased that you've been fighting." "Yeah, guessed that," he sighed. "And you shame me as well," Alvin growled. "Look for someone who cares." Hiccup shot back. Alvin grabbed his arm, bruisingly hard, and he yelped. "You're gonna regret that," Alvin snarled as they pulled up into the drive. Hiccup reached for the door, but Alvin was out quicker, grabbing his skinny arm as he scrambled out and hauling him into the house. The lights warmed the place as the door slammed and was locked behind him, and he was shoved into the kitchen. His mother looked up from the table, quietly reading, the dinner already in the oven and salad prepared. "Alvin. What's going on?" she asked, her green eyes worried. "Your ungrateful bastard of a son has been caught brawling outside the mall with a gang," he reported. "That's a lie," Hiccup replied hotly. "Mom, I wasn't." The slap Alvin dealt him propelled him back half a dozen steps and slammed him back against the cupboard. He slid down to his knees and looked up in shock as his mother gasped at the scene. "Don't you dare contradict me, boy," Alvin roared. "I saw you there. I have a right to spend time with my friends even if they decide to do something stupid," Hiccup replied, scrambling to his feet. Alvin grabbed his patched green sweater, shaking him. "Whose idea was it, boy?" he shouted. Hiccup took a deep breath. "I really have no idea," he lied, having a very good idea. Alvin knocked him down again, the blow throwing him against the kitchen table. He hit hard, curling up to protect his head as Alvin loomed over him. He flinched at another blow that glanced off his head, then felt himself hauled up by the hair. "Whose idea?" Alvin roared, grabbing his face and digging his thick fingers painfully into the boy's bruised cheeks. "Go to hell," Hiccup grunted, struggling to get away. "Alvin, please," Valka cried, trying to move forward, but Hiccup urgently opened his eyes and waved his hand. "No, Mom, stay back," he shouted, then groaned as Alvin punched him in the middle. His legs folded as he saw his mom pause, and Alvin turned to shout at her. Forcing his legs straight, he staggered up and shoved the huge man in the back, pulling back his fist and almost cringing as he punched him in the face. "Stay away from her," he snarled, leaping between the huge shape of Alvin and Valka's frail outline. "Hiccup," his mother called in shock as Alvin backhanded him. He went down again and he glanced up, dazed, his cheek white hot with pain. But he scrambled up again, facing Alvin with clenched fists. Alvin was already unbuckling his belt and his face was looking especially menacing. "You know, Boy, I think you'd be a lot better if your father had disciplined you properly when you were little, instead of leaving it to me to do now, he growled. Don't speak about my father. Hiccup growled. He was 100 times the man you are. He never raised his hand to a woman, or a child. And that's why you're the waste of space you are. Alvin shouted, pulling his belt free and grabbing at the boy's hair. Hiccup batted his hand away and found his wrist snagged. Kicking and cursing, he managed to kick Alvin painfully in the knee. He kicked again as Alvin threw him forward against the table once more. He spun to face Alvin as a ferocious slap impacted his cheek. His vision blurred and he sagged before Alvin pinned him. Staring up at his mother, he struggled as the principal leaned over him and the first blows fell. He screwed his eyes closed, his teeth gritted against any cry. Even through his admittedly thin sweater, the blows from the belt on his body were very painful, and when Alvin paused, grunting and sweating, he remained still, breathing hard. Finally, Alvin stood back, throwing him across the kitchen floor, then kicking him and making him curl up more. But what hurt him most was the sound of his mother crying. "Oh, Hiccup," she whispered, her pale face streaked with tears. She coughed again and struggled to muffle it, knowing her husband was impatient with her illness. "How could you? Fighting, even punching your father, being so ungrateful." Biting his lip against a groan, he looked up, his green eyes pleading for understanding, but Alvin had already moved to her, wrapping his arms around her and stroking her head. "It's all right, love, this stress isn't good for you," he mumbled loudly enough for Hiccup to hear, and the boy cringed as he painfully levered himself to his feet. "To your room, boy. I don't want to see you again until Monday." Light-headed and aching all over, he stumbled up the stairs, trudging to his room. He slammed the door and slumped onto the bed, fumbling for his phone and seeing a crack on the cover, but the screen lit immediately when he thumbed it on and he sighed. Wincing, he kicked his trainers off and curled on the bed. Another evening without food, another evening where he had been beaten, another evening where his mother had sided with Alvin against her only child. He screwed his eyes closed as he heard the bolt slam home and lock him in. No matter what he did, he could never win. Perhaps it was finally time to stop trying. Chapter 12, A Friend in Need. Chapter text. He awoke the next morning, aching all over. His head was aching and his face felt stiff from the blows. He grimaced, then got up and yawned, regretting the stretch which pulled on his welts. Cautiously, he lifted his t-shirt and sweater to see a mess of bruises over his back from the belt. He grimaced, chucking off the clothes and changing into a green long-sleeved tee, the green sweater and a fresh pair of brown jeans. He pulled on clean socks and trainers, then walked to the door and found it still locked. He paused and leaned against it. He had no clue what to do now. Alvin could open it any time, or he could be locked in his room with no food, water or even toilet facilities until Monday as he had threatened. And he wouldn't put it past the man. He closed his eyes for a long moment. He had a decision to make, and then his hand dropped to the phone and recalled the only person who had his number. Perhaps the only person who actually cared. Decisively, he grabbed a change of clothes and underwear and shoved them into his school bag, grabbed his coat and scarf and pulled the window open, scrambling onto the sill and pulling the window closed behind him as he jumped, landing with a sprawl on the yard and ducking out the gate. It was early, so he took his time walking back to town, heading for the forge, his head down and hands stuffed in his pockets. It was cold, with his breath coming in clouds and mist hanging in skeins between the trees as sunlight hesitantly began to light Burke. He ignored a few joggers as he trudged along. He was stiff, cold and hungry, and he knew he had to stay away from Alvin for the moment. And he was angry, more angry than he could express, because the man had beaten him in front of his mother, and because somehow, she had supported him against Hiccup. And just now, he had to get away, or he would say something so catastrophic that he may end up killing Alvin or being thrown out. He needed to cool off. Idly, he looked up as the next jogger closed, a young woman with bouncing blonde plait and pale blue jogging pants and sweat top, and he did a double take. It was Astrid. Sighing, he stuck his chin in his chest and walked on as she bounded by him, eyes fixed ahead and earbuds attached to the MP3 player on her arm. He sighed as she went past, but he heard her draw to a stop, pause and then trot after him. "Hiccup?" she asked. Yup, it was Astrid. And she was going to stick her nose in his business again. Warily, he lifted his head and turned to face her. Yes, he said a little more shortly than he had intended. I wanted to thank you, she said in an embarrassed voice. Then she shook herself and looked more composed, her voice firmer. I got away. My parents were very relieved that I hadn't gotten myself involved. Good for you, he said sarcastically, and she gave a small gasp. Your face, she murmured, pointing. He turned away. Yeah, well, you get bruises in fights, he told her shortly. But I didn't think. She murmured, then saw him continuing to walk away. Thanks, hiccup. I mean it. He just waved a hand in acknowledgement, not looking back. He heard her sigh, then turn and her running steps recede, and for a moment, he wished that he had taken the olive branch in the spirit it seemed to have been offered. But it wasn't real. Miss Perfect would have just stuck her nose in, and then on Monday, everyone would have known how he got beat up at home as well. Or he would go back to being public enemy number one. He stuck his chin into the thin scarf and sped up. He was sitting in the back of the forge when Gobber arrived, having already fed Toothless and fussed the mongrel, and munched down a spare and moderately stale granola bar he found in his locker. The older man stared at him as he looked up, his bruised face resigned and emerald eyes bright. You're here early, laddie, Gobber commented, ambling to his locker and grabbing a stubby cigar. He stepped into oil-stained beige coveralls and then turned back to his protege. And what happened to your face, laddie? Hiccup stood up and gave a small smile. Well, the guys and me got into a fight with the jocks behind the mall, and not much of a fighter, he admitted. We gonna stand here chatting, old man, or are we gonna fix some cars? Gobber patted him across the shoulders and seemed to miss the unconscious hiss of pain the boy gave. Hiccup grinned at him as he popped the hood and peered into the engine. What's the problem, Gobber? The one-handed man hobbled to the job sheet and peered thoughtfully. Misfiring, he read. Hiccup grinned. Be done in 10, he grinned. They worked steadily through the day, working all the way down the problem list until, around 4, the last job was done and Gobber laid back in his sagging chair, sipping mead from a hip flask as Hiccup tidied the workshop up and wiped his hands, then washed them clean. Gobber gave him a grin. That was good work, laddie, he complimented the boy. You know, if you've got time, we could go and grab a bite. He expected the boy to decline, but there was a pause and Hiccup's wide green eyes were suddenly uncertain. He shuffled his feet and looked away. I'd like that, he admitted. He was starving, his stomach growling painfully. No dinner, a granola bar for breakfast and no lunch meant the teen was starting to feel lightheaded. He scuffed his trainers on the oil-stained concrete floor and he paused for a long moment. Gobber. You know, you said I could maybe stay on your couch if I ever needed to get away. The mechanic's eyes widened in shock and he walked carefully towards the lean shape, seeing Hiccup stare at the floor and look ashamed. Of course, laddie, it's got your name on it, he assured the boy. You're welcome to stay as long as ye need. Hiccup raised his bruised face and there was immense relief there, making Gobber feel worse. And I will expect I be told what the hell happened, boy, he added seriously. Hiccup opened his mouth to protest, but finally, he gave a defeated shrug. Not much really to tell, he admitted, opening his locker and stripping his overalls off. The guys got into a fight at the mall and Alvin caught me running away. When he got me home, he decided to teach me a lesson. He reached up and his t-shirt rode up, granting Gobber the merest flash of his bruises. The older man swept forward, grabbing his shoulder and using his hook to very carefully slide the cloth up over the boy's smooth torso, revealing the bruises, large clumps from fists and the long lines of bruises from the belt. Hiccup. Gobber breathed in shock. You. Leave it. Hiccup said sharply, jerking away and swiftly tugging his sweater down. I'll deal with it. But if you'll tell the authorities. Gobber began and the boy slumped. I've been in a fight and I'm a total screw-up. Alvin is the well-respected principal of our high school. Who do you think they'll believe, he asked dully. And if they did arrest him, what would happen to Mom? She still loves him. She keeps telling me to try to get on with him. And I did hit him, after he's hit me for years, but it's my fault. He swallowed. If I did that, she might choose him over me. He slammed his locker and grabbed his bank card, slinging his school bag over his shoulder. Gobber nodded, not really knowing what he could say. "You're always welcome with me," he assured the boy as they headed out to the local restaurant and diner, the mead hall, where Gobber stuffed the boy until he couldn't eat another bite and paid for the lot. Hiccup had offered and almost seemed offended that he wouldn't accept his money, but Gobber pointed out that he had not had a lunch break and Gobber owed him wages anyway. With a grateful grin, the lad followed him to his tiny, stuffy flat, and after a shower and an evening watching obscure sports and war movies, he slept secure and safe for the first time in years. Chapter 13, One for the Team. Chapter text. Against his better judgment and every sense of self-preservation, he arrived at school on time on Monday, keeping his head down and searching for his friends, but there was no sign of them. He walked quietly to his locker, seeing curious glances as he stalked by, dumping his bags in the locker and heading towards his first class. He glimpsed Astrid, primly grabbing her books and heading out, and noted the absence of her friends as well. A nasty suspicion was bubbling in his stomach, and his fears were met when he arrived in history class to find Snotlout, Fishlegs, Dager and Cammy all missing. Astrid was sitting at the front and glared at him as he slouched in and took his usual place at the back before the teacher, Mr. Grimborn, swept his dark gaze across the class. "You may have noticed the additional spare seats we have in class today," he announced calmly, his calculating voice clear. "This is because a number of our football players as well as cheerleaders stupidly decided to get involved in a brawl over the weekend. They will not be rejoining us until Thursday." There were gasps and all eyes swung to Astrid, the class president, and to Hiccup, who was usually at the center of any trouble. "Accordingly, I will need to readjust assignments. Since Mr. Oswaldson and Miss Boglaufer are otherwise engaged, I will expect Mr. Haddock and Miss Horferson to work together until their respective partners return. Is that clear, Mr. Haddock?" "Sorry, Mr. Grimborn. I was just admiring your exceptional delivery. Seriously, very smooth, excelled enunciation and terrible judgment in making me work with Miss Perfect," the auburn-haired boy replied lazily. He felt Astrid's eyes land on him and her azure gaze harden. He cringed inwardly. It would have been sorta nice to work with her without her hating his guts, but that wasn't happening. "If only you had 1/10 her qualities," Mr. Grimborn sighed and his face hardened. "Got 'em all," Hiccup shot back. "Just choose not to waste 'em in your class. I mean, what use will Viking history be in 5 years' time when I'm working my ass off in the real world?" Mr. Grimborn gave him the kind of look usually only produced by Alvin, and he felt himself shiver inwardly. "Probably not much when you're sweeping floors or emptying the trash. Nevertheless, you will be working with her. Though I guess she would hardly want to risk her average with a screw-up like you." He stared at the rebellious boy and then back to Astrid. "My apologies, Miss Horferson, but I am afraid you can blame your friend for her stupidity in leaving you at the mercy of Mr. Haddock and his supposed wit." Astrid's eyes widened and she managed a small nod, her heart sinking. "Please, feel free to relocate to facilitate your classwork. Today, you will be discussing the relevance and similarities of the Viking response to law-breaking compared to our own judicial system." Finishing noting the task on her pad, Astrid rose and walked back to join Hiccup at the back of the class, an exasperated expression on her face. She sat down by him and cast him an unfriendly look. "You can be sure I blame Cammy for being so stupid and that idiot Snotlout for getting baited by Dager," she complained. "I can't believe I got landed with you." Mutual Hiccup grouched. "Dag and I work well." "As in not at all," she shot at him. Surprisingly, he gave a grin, his bright green eyes twinkling with amusement. "Sometimes he does, since he does like the more violent bits of Viking history," he conceded. "No doubt you will stress in case your perfecter average is at risk." She cast him an unfriendly look and snapped her textbook open pointedly, searching for the correct page. Hiccup remained hunched, his hood pulled up over his auburn hair and arms folded on the desk. "Can't you at least pretend to do something?" she asked him, and he looked at her with an unreadable expression. "Nope. I'm failing this class," he said quietly. She grabbed his arm, her eyes flaring. "You are not bringing me down with you, Hiccup," she snapped. He winced slightly as she carelessly compressed one of his bruises. "And why are you here today?" he hissed to her. "You should be with your friends, sitting at home." "So should you," she hissed back, but he blinked. "Yeah, really not sure why I'm not suspended," he muttered. "At least they never caught you. Anyway, knock ourself out, Astrid. I'm sure you'll do fine with this assignment. And he flipped the hood over his head, buried his head in his folded arms and refused to respond to any further questions. Exasperated, she turned to the textbook, speed-reading the principles of Viking and modern law and noting down the similarities and differences, completing the task as the bell rang. Without looking at the boy, she rose, handed the paper in with her name alone on it and stalked out. Hiccup looked up as Mr. Grimborn walked to him and grabbed his shoulder roughly. "Mr. Treacher wants to see you now," he growled. "Hooray!" I thought he would. The boy sighed as he was manhandled to his feet and Frog marched to the principal's office. Marcia nodded and gestured to the door, her usually friendly face very hostile. It seemed everyone was in a bad mood today. "He's to go straight in," she said in a cold voice, and the boy was shoved in through the door. Alvin sat at his desk and stared at Hiccup. He nodded to Mr. Grimborn. "Thank you, Vigor. I'll take it from here," he said gruffly, and the man nodded, then let himself out. Hiccup stood staring at him as he rose slowly from his chair and walked around his desk, headed menacingly for the boy. Hiccup backed up a pace and raised a hand. "Marcia will hear," he said quickly, hating how panicked he sounded. He hadn't realized how anxious he had felt at facing the man, until this moment. And he hated himself for the weakness. Alvin grabbed his shoulder and hauled him to the chair, forcing the boy to sit. And then Alvin stared down at him. "Your mother were very upset when she found you had run away," he said. "Is she okay?" "She were very disappointed," Alvin smirked. "Attacking me then running away. What's she supposed to think?" Hiccup looked up into his face. "You tell me," he shot back sullenly. Suddenly Alvin was leaning forward and the boy forced himself not to recoil, not to draw back from the man who had beaten him up. "That you're a worthless troublemaker," he breathed menacingly. "That she would be better off without you. That it would be better if you're left home." Hiccup's green eyes widened in sudden fear. Much as he hated living with Treacher, he endured it for the sake of his mother. To lose her when he knew how controlling and abusive Treacher was, how frail she was and how little the man cared for her well-being would be unthinkable. "She's my mother," Hiccup argued softly. "She would never." Alvin suddenly grabbed his shoulder in a vice-like grip. "She'll say what I tell her to say," he snarled. "And I'll make her be the one to throw you out. Do you want that?" And he wanted so much to tell the man to go to hell, that he didn't care what he did or said because he couldn't control Hiccup. That Alvin was nothing to him, just a callous interloper who had mesmerized his mother. That Hiccup would be fine and would show Alvin what he could really do. But the bald truth was that Hiccup worried about and loved Valka, and he knew that having to throw her only son out would probably be her death knell. It would leave her at the mercy of Alvin, and the man didn't care for her at all. "No," he murmured. "What were that?" Alvin growled. "I said no." "Do you want it in a letter?" he snapped, seeing the flash of rage across the man's face. "So you come home this evening, boy, or you're never coming home. Clear?" Alvin snapped. "Crystal," Hiccup said sullenly. Gods only know what Alvin would do to him when he went back voluntarily. Alvin tightened his grip and Hiccup gasped in pain, seeing the man lean closer. "Whose idea was it to fight?" the principal growled. "Everyone is suspended for 3 days. Except me," Hiccup said tightly. "Because I want to keep me eye on you rather than you're messing around at home doing nothing." Alvin growled. "But I want to suspend the person who caused this for longer." "So who was it?" "Hughes. Oswaldson. Stringer. Oh, you'd love that," Hiccup smirked. "Sure it wasn't one of your precious football players, say your star quarterback?" He grimaced as the grip on his shoulder tightened further and his arm grew numb. "Are you turning him in?" Alvin asked him, and Hiccup gave a grim smile. "Me? You are joking. My life would literally be not worth 2 cents if I did that," he replied shortly. "Whose idea was it to fight?" Alvin repeated. Hiccup stared up into the cruel eyes and realized if he named anyone, he was a pariah, and if he didn't name anyone, Alvin would pick on one of his friends and then say Hiccup had turned him in, and make him a pariah. He paused and realized his only option was to take one for the team. "Mine," he said evenly. "You got me, Al. I decided to get half the team suspended. Pretty successful idea as well. So you wanna suspend me now?" Chapter 14, said the wrong thing. Chapter text. It was halfway through lunch when Astrid realized she hadn't seen Hiccup since history, not that she really cared, she reminded herself, but because his friends were all suspended, like hers, and it was due to him that she hadn't shared their fate, she was sort of looking out for him. She poked her salad aimlessly and wondered what had happened to the boy. She had seen him after the fight and the bruises he had were nowhere near as bad as the ones he had on Sunday when she had spied him as she went jogging before coming back for breakfast and then doing her homework. She paused. It had been pretty early on a Sunday and to see the boy walking slowly through the misty park with a lot of bruises had made her feel awkward. He had been pretty hostile and she had given up, but she had felt the need to thank him because he had saved her neck, and by the look of it, at the cost of his own. And while he was an irritating smartass and definitely a troublemaker, he had looked pretty down as he trudged through the mists. She wished that she had made a greater effort to talk to him, but she just found herself getting so exasperated by his attitude. She sighed and then heard someone behind her. She glanced up to see Mr. Grimborn. "Can I help you, sir?" she asked politely. The man gave a thin smile, his cold, calculating dark glare sending a shiver down her spine. She had never liked him, but he was undoubtedly a fine teacher, every lesson meticulously planned and executed. "Two things, Miss Hawthorne," he said. "Firstly, may I confirm that Mr. Haddock took no part in your class assignment? I note his name was not on the paper." Her eyes widened and she thought furiously. She had done the whole thing while Hiccup had just buried his head in his arms. She had flounced to the front with what was certainly a very good paper and had put her own name on it deliberately. And he really hadn't contributed. "I should have put his name on it, was an error on my part," she murmured. "I apologize." "So you are saying he did make a meaningful contribution to the paper?" the teacher asked her pointedly. She sighed. "He didn't distract me," she admitted. "And his style of work is very different to my own. I completed the work. But he was my partner." "So you are willing to allow him to get the grade your paper earned, even though he had no part in the work generated?" Mr. Grimborn asked her pointedly. She nodded. "Those are the terms of working in pairs, sir," she admitted calmly, wondering where this was going. "I abide by what I am told to do." He stared at her for a second more, then nodded. "The second thing is that the principal wishes to see you," he said. She blinked and rapidly tidied her lunch away, rising swiftly. "No need for haste, Miss Hawthorne. He will be happy to speak with you as soon as you are ready." She blushed and followed him as he led her to the office. A thought flashed across her mind: had Hiccup landed her in it after all, even when she had just gifted him an A for that paper? Marcia had smiled and reassured her that Mr. Treacher was in a good mood, so that she was a mite more relaxed when she walked in and sat as directed. Mr. Treacher finished the sentence he was writing and then looked up with his vaguely unsettling smile. "I wanted to speak to you about the fracas that happened last Saturday," he said pleasantly. She nodded, not wanting to say anything incriminating. "I believe you were there." She paled and swallowed, thinking furiously. Had someone turned her in? No, because she would have been pulled in first thing and suspended. But Hiccup had been in, had he betrayed her in exchange for not being suspended? "Not quite, sir," she said clearly. "We were all at the cafe when the others, Hiccup and his friends, came to join us and started a lot of silly posturing. I was chatting with Heather and Hiccup was being really annoying, and next thing I know, Snotlout and Dagger are shouting at each other and they are heading out to the mall for a fight. I tried to get the girls not to go, but they got carried away." "And you weren't there?" Treacher demanded. "No, sir," she replied primly. "When they decided to fight, I left them and headed home. I only heard what happened this morning." "Your friends didn't call you?" Treacher enquired. "They often don't on Sunday because it's homework day," she explained. "And I would guess, if they were in trouble, their parents would have taken their phones." "Do you want me to call them, sir?" "No, I just wanted to clarify one point," Astrid Treacher said thoughtfully. "You said Hiccup was annoying you and your friend Heather." Astrid nodded. "So the decision for the fight was not made by Hiccup?" Astrid shook her head. "No, sir," she reported calmly. "I believe Dagger and Snotlout were the ones who made the challenge and accepted it." "He lied to me," Treacher growled, his face momentarily falling into a menacing scowl. Then he shook himself and Astrid wondered if she had imagined it. Thank you, Miss Horferson. Your input has been invaluable. I may have done Hiccup Haddock a disservice, one that I shall be sure to correct. He nodded. You may go. Yes, sir, she said and walked out, a feeling of unease in her stomach, mentally rerunning the conversation. Had Hiccup taken the blame for inciting the fight? Certainly, he hadn't caused the argument that had been Dagger and Snotlout, both of whom loathed each other. Maybe he was trying for time off on suspension. But whatever, she had undone whatever scheme he had planned and helped out the principal. After all, that was what a class president was supposed to do, wasn't it? Oh. At home, Astrid turned to her homework and soon found her mind wandering. Why would anyone take blame for something they hadn't done? To protect someone else. And then she groaned. By her words, she may have lengthened Snotlout and Dagger's suspensions and compromised the football team. Hiccup being suspended wasn't much of a loss, but the star players from the team would be. She dug her fingers through her hair and stared at the page. She couldn't concentrate at the moment, so she went downstairs to get a glass of water. Her mother, Ingrid, looked up as she sat down thoughtfully and drank quietly. Problems? Ingrid asked, and Astrid looked up with a wan smile. Mom, I think I may have been unfair to someone, she murmured. Ingrid frowned. She knew her daughter was working hard as class president and took all her duties seriously. How? Well, it's a really annoying boy, he's always causing trouble. She began. So you think you may have misjudged him? Her mother asked. No, he is annoying and a troublemaker, she confirmed, but he helped me within art and I found out he took the blame for something he didn't do. But when asked, I told the principal what really happened, and I may have landed him and someone else in trouble. Are you sure what his motives were? Her mother asked. You can hardly be expected to understand someone else's motivations. If you told the truth, then that is all you could have done, Astrid. Blue Eyes stared up at her mom and she smiled. But maybe you should give this boy the benefit of the doubt. No one is all bad, and sometimes, people behave badly because there is something affecting them that we know nothing about. Astrid paused, recalling the bruises. Then she smiled. I understand, she said without really. But he's very disruptive, he hangs with a bad crowd and he doesn't care at all about his grades or school at all. Ingrid shrugged. Of course, you know him better than I do, darling, she smiled. But you are president of the whole class, aren't you, not just the bits that have an unblemished record? You know, I'm pretty sure he doesn't want my help, Astrid told her mom, refilling her glass and heading upstairs. And he may not be happy with what I've said anyway. I think I may have gotten him into more trouble. Chapter 15, Wasting Time. Chapter text. As soon as he had been suspended, he had grabbed his bags and headed out of school, waiting until he was out of the grounds before pulling out his phone and calling home. After 2 rings, his mother picked up as he knew she would. I don't expect the phone to ring more than 3 times before you pick it up, woman. It's me, he said when she picked up and recited the number as Alvin had demanded she do every time. He heard her gasp in surprise and waited. Hiccup. Darling, are you all right? I was so worried, and your father? The boy huffed in exasperation and bit back the instinctive answer. It was a constant argument because for his mother, husband equaled father. For Hiccup, the two were very different. I saw Alvin at school today, he told her, his voice neutral. I've been suspended from school for being in the fight. Are you coming home then? She asked him, the hope in her voice painful to hear. He suspected she was hoping for some time with him without her husband being around, because she knew the two didn't get along. Not now, he said quietly. I'll be back later. I want to see Gobber and maybe do something useful before I come home. I guess I'll be grounded when I get back and I won't get to see him for a while. I love you, Hiccup. Be safe, she said and put the phone down. He sighed. He did need to see Gobber and walk toothless, but he would delay going back home as long as he could. So on the way to the forge, he phoned another number he had collected on Saturday. Dag. Hiccup. What you doing, man? Dagger asked, sounding very cheerful. I was about to ask you the same question, Hiccup shot back with a small grin as he rounded the corner and the forge came into sight. "We're hanging round the park, wanna join?" Dagger said casually. Hiccup stared at the forge and then changed direction. "Be there in 10, he said cheerfully. "Swings. Where else?" Dagger grinned and hung up. Stuffing the phone in his pocket, Hiccup lengthened his stride, and it wasn't long before he found himself at the swings where the others were lounging around and chasing off smaller kids. They were pleased to see him, and after a bout of fist bumps and high fives, he settled on a swing, grinning. "We missed you," Thuggery noted, and Hiccup shrugged. "Yeah, missed you guys as well," he murmured. "Only realized you weren't at school when." "You mean you weren't suspended?" Savage asked him with a frown. "What gives, man?" Dagger added, inspecting the auburn-haired boy thoughtfully. "Actually, I think Al decided to punish me by not letting me off school," he grumbled. "Al?" "Yeah, treacher. First name's Alvin. Didn't I tell ya before?" Hiccup asked, and there was universal head shaking. "And how are you on first name terms with the principal?" Dagger asked him suspiciously. "Chill, Dad, he lives near me and knows my mom," Hiccup explained with forced nonchalance. "Alvin? Yeah, think ya can make something of it?" Hiccup challenged him with a grin. There were sniggers and smirks all round. "So why are you here?" Thuggery asked him, and he sighed. "He was asking who started the fight, whose idea it was, so I claimed it was mine," he explained, swinging back and forth on the swing. "He had to suspend me then. Well, apparently, it was my fault most of the football team is suspended." Dagger offered a fist and they bumped again. Then Savage grinned and pulled out a bottle. Hiccup's eyes popped wide in shock. "So anyone," he grinned. Is that?" Hiccup asked. Dagger grinned. "You an alcohol virgin," he teased, and Hiccup shook his head vehemently. "Nah, just shocked you managed to get hold," he said quickly. Savage grinned and waved his ID, which claimed he was 22, not 18. Inwardly, Hiccup groaned. Then Savage unscrewed the top and handed the bottle to Hiccup. "You're already on catch-up," he grinned, and Hiccup sighed, then took a small sip, coughing as the alcohol burned his throat. Dagger glared at him, and he took a larger sip before handing it back to his friends. "So where did you learn those moves you had against Snot and Fish?" Thuggery asked him, handing the bottle along. Hiccup took a small sip and passed it along. "Dad," he explained. "He was in the military for 10 years before he married. Afterwards, he was a company director for Dragon's Edge Towers, until he died, 5 years ago." "Wow, didn't know that, man," Thuggery said, his face apologetic. "So you're loaded?" Savage asked guilelessly, and Hiccup rolled his eyes. As if he sighed. "When Dad's plane went down, he was declared missing, not dead. That meant his money is still in trust, and Mom and I are, well, not loaded is an understatement." "So just the two of you?" Thuggery asked, but Hiccup grabbed the bottle and took another larger sip. "Mom managed to get a decree and has remarried," he admitted gruffly, scuffing the ground. "He's an uber ass." Dagger clapped him across the shoulder. "Don't sweat, man," he assured Hiccup. "No matter what, you got us." "Oh." He only realized the time when it was getting dark and the cold park lights cast deep shadows on the little playground. The crew had hung around for hours, chatting, showing off, standing on the swings and planning revenge on the jocks. Savage had gone for burgers and had come back with some cheese-smeared and squashed offerings that Hiccup had eaten eagerly. Between them, they had polished off the entire bottle of SoCo, and Hiccup's head was spinning gently. But as he peered at his watch, his eyes widened and he scrambled up. "Oh crap," he muttered. "Gotta go. I need to drop in and see Gobber, my uncle, before I head home. And feed my dog and apologize to Gobber why I missed work again. Same time tomorrow." Dagger called, and Hiccup flashed him a grin before he ran off. His heart sank as he saw the forge dark and closed up. He stopped at the front door, then ran round the back, fumbling at the key. "Toothless," he shouted. "Are you okay, boy?" But there was no reassuring bark, no sound at all. Frantically, he fumbled at the lock and burst into the back, to see nothing. The dog bed was empty, as were the bowls, and no sign of Gobber. He searched frantically, then locked the back and raced out into the street. "Toothless," he shouted. What had happened? Had the dog got out? Where was he? Surely Gobber hadn't taken him the pound. Toothless. He thought his heart would stop with relief when he heard a faint bark, and then he saw the skinny black shape galloping down the street, the lead trailing behind him. Racing towards the mutt as fast as his lanky legs would take him, Hiccup was hit waist-high by the dog, bearing him to the ground and licking him thoroughly. Toothless. Gah! That doesn't wash out, he protested, laughing, rubbing the dog in relief. Next time, walk your own damned dog. Gobber grumbled, limping up. Hiccup gazed up at the angry face and sagged. I'm so sorry, Gobber, he said, and scrambled to his feet. I lost track of time. Gobber scowled at him, hearing the slight slur in his voice. He beckoned him close and grabbed his shoulder, then hauled him close. He frowned. Don't let Alvin smell the liquor on your boy, or he'll whip the hide off of your, he warned. He'll try. Hiccup said with a little more spirit. Gobber shook his head. Laddie, we both know Alvin is far more powerful than you, and if you really tries to fight him, it ain't gonna end well. He patted the shoulder. Go home. Nod. Say yes and no. Be with your mother. Be patient. Valka can't lose you as well as your dad. She wouldn't notice, Gobber Hiccup growled, his tone harsher than he meant. She sides with him more than me anyway. And you're so ornery it ain't easy to be on your side, is it? Gobber asked him with insight. Just try, laddie. And if you're desperate, call me. The boy looked up, still angry but at least willing to listen. Thanks, Gobber, he said grudgingly. Now git home, laddie, before he locks you out. The older man said. I'll lock the mutt up, if you'll come round and do his walk tomorrow. I promise, Hiccup said quietly, his green eyes filled with remorse. The few moments he had thought he had lost Toothless had been truly horrible and had sobered him up. He fussed the dog one last time and handed the leash to Gobber. For a moment, the older man scowled at him, then threw a hug around him. If you need anything, call me, he whispered. This is the boy I know. You're better than this. Hiccup hugged him tightly. No, I'm not, he thought, but said nothing, just fondling Toothless one last time, then sprinting off. He glanced at his watch and his heart sank. It was almost 8 and he wondered if Alvin had locked the door for the night. He sprinted up the road and arrived at the door, panting. Trembling, he put his key in the door and turned the latch, and the door opened. He paused and then straightened up, still breathing hard. This is for Mom, he thought determinedly as he pushed the door open and quietly pushed it closed behind him. Feeling a shiver that had nothing to do with the ambient temperature, he placed his bag by the door and turned, to face the powerful shape of Alvin. Welcome home, Ixip, he said. Chapter 16, Marked Man. Chapter text. Gossip was rife as Astrid arrived and walked to her locker, smiling to the students and answering a few queries. She swiftly dropped off her bag and collected her books for the first few lessons, then turned to the corridor and Anna and Olaf, a pair of recent transfers to the senior year from Arundel High, who wanted a discussion about participation in the senior prom committee. She turned to them with a smile and then she froze and a tall shape barged by, hands stuffed in pockets and bag slung over one shoulder. She gaped. It was Hiccup. Excusing herself from the others, she turned and strode after him, her eyes shocked. As far as she was aware, he was suspended, so why was he in school now? Hey, wait up, she called, running after him. He didn't pause, his hood up over his tousled auburn hair, his head down and eyes fixed ahead. Hiccup. He didn't slow down, so she darted through the milling students and grabbed his arms. His head snapped round and he glared at her. What? He snapped. She paused, breathing hard, and let go. What are you doing here? She asked him. His emerald gaze flicked over her. Attending school, he told her snarkily. Thought that was what this building was. Or have I accidentally wandering into a rail station? I mean. She dropped her voice. I thought you were suspended. He stared at her, brows furrowing and his gaze bored into her. What is it to you? He shot back. But why are you here then? She asked him. I got unsuspended. He said shortly. Look, Miss Perfect, I don't wanna be here any more than you apparently want me here. But I was ordered to turn up, so here I am. Do you know what happened? She asked. He stared at her and then turned away. One of the others must have said something, he said in a low voice. Because Dagger and Snot have been suspended for another week. Astrid stared at him and felt a sudden sinking feeling in her stomach. They are, she breathed. He quirked an eyebrow. Bad news for the football team, he said sarcastically and walked away. Astrid stared after him, then shook herself as the bell sounded and ran towards her English class, just making it in time. She forced herself to concentrate on the play they were reading and made copious notes that would make no sense later, just to force herself not to drift. Because she had a horrible feeling she had been the one who said something. By morning recess, word had gone round that Hiccup Haddock had done a deal with the principal to get himself off suspension. And that deal had condemned the two best players in the football team to an extra week of detention, meaning both wouldn't be playing on Friday. Astrid heard a number of students discussing the revelation, both in shock that he had rolled on his friends and that his actions had crippled the Berk Vikings football team. She sat in study hall, listening to Jadon, Helga and Linda chatting. Word has it that Dagger and Snotlout don't know yet, Jadon explained, twirling his pencil. Wouldn't give a dime for his chances when Dagger finds out he rolled. Ha! Half the school are after his ass for ruining our chances. Linda interrupted. It's Meathead on Friday, our biggest rivals for the Archipelago Cup. And without our best players. But he was suspended, Helga commented. And Hiccup is the last person anyone would expect to roll on his friends. Maybe his family put pressure on him. Linda asked. Well, I heard Dog's Breath and Maggots are looking out for him, Jadon told them cheerfully. Wouldn't like to be in his shoes when they get their hands on him. He'd wish he'd remained suspended. Astrid rose and walked thoughtfully out of the room, wondering where Hiccup was. The boy in question was due in art after the break, so she headed for the studio early, after found him sitting at the back, looking at his phone. Swiftly, she walked and sat down by him. He rolled his eyes. Not you again, he sighed. Have you heard what they have been saying? She asked him. Let's pretend I'm never being muttered about and don't automatically zone out the comments, he suggested sarcastically. She felt the irritation rise but stamped on it determinedly. He is one of the senior class, she reminded herself. Rumor has it you rolled on the others, she told him. His eyes widened. Hell, no, he snapped, sitting up straighter. That's the last thing I'd do. He paused. Has Dagger heard? He murmured. Well, all the school knows, Astrid commented as the other students started to file in. And some guys called Dog's Breath and Maggots are looking for you. His eyes widened in shock and concern. I don't remember them, she murmured. Devron Henderson and Mikkel Mason, he murmured. Other friends of Dagger's. We didn't get on in freshman year, or since. He stared at his phone for a moment. I need to speak to Dagger before he hears. But as he made to rise, Astrid grabbed his arm and hauled him back into the seat, for Miss Sylvester had appeared. She nodded and smiled to the class, and then noted Hiccup texting very obviously. She paused until he sent, then walked to him. May I take that until the end of the lesson, Hiccup? She asked him directly, holding her hand out. His emerald gaze flicked up rebelliously and he was on the verge of saying something but bit his lip and handed it over. Sorry, Miss Sylvester, he said quietly as the phone beeped. Dagger had responded, but he would have to wait the best part of an hour for the reply. He took a deep breath. This was his favorite class and he managed to produce a competent though not brilliant sketch by the bell, then approached Miss Sylvester for the return of his phone. She handed it over to him without a word, but her eyes were disappointed. I really am sorry, he repeated, and she nodded. Please don't let it happen again, she requested, and he nodded, having the grace not to look at the reply until he walked out of the room. Dagger was predictably terse. Did you roll? If yes, you are dead. He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. He knew exactly who had leaked his supposed snitching. The principal. And thanks to Alvin, he was effectively a marked man. Chapter 17, Ultimatum. Chapter text. It hadn't been a difficult decision, leaving the school and going in search of his friends, because failing to straighten this out now may mean he had no friends, or much of a life to enjoy not having them in. Dagger was a psychotic son of a bitch, and if he was gunning for Hiccup, then his life was going to get unbearable. Cutting school, skipping detention and facing whatever Alvin did to him was pretty much no contest compared to having Dager as his enemy. So he headed for the park where he guessed the guys would be. And when he reached the swings he wasn't disappointed, but he was vaguely alarmed to find not only Dager, Thuggery and Savage but also their cronies Dog's Breath and Maggots. All were taller and considerably more built than he was, but he walked casually up, nodding his greetings. But this time there were no high fives or fist bumps. Dager looked at him like something he had scraped off his shoe. "Hi, Dag," Hiccup said with the right amount of casualness, making sure he didn't look worried. "What gives?" "Now that's the question," Dager growled. "What did you give?" Hiccup froze, his green eyes widening and a mildly hurt expression crossing his bruised face. "Come on, Dag, you know I wouldn't roll on you," he protested. "I frickin' stepped up and took the blame. And now I'm suspended for another week and you're off suspension," Dager pointed out. "You see my concerns." Hiccup gave a false little laugh. Of course, he admitted, rubbing the back of his neck self-consciously. "But it isn't true, Dager. I swear." "Then who did turn me in?" Dager growled. Dog's Breath was already slapping his fist into his palm and the auburn-haired teen backed up a pace, green gaze darting from man to man. "I don't know," he protested. "Dag, I've got your back. I've always got your back. I guess it may have been one of the girls. Maybe they don't understand." In an instant, Dager lurched forward and Savage and Thuggery grabbed Hiccup's arms, holding him still. In a second, Dager's arms was wrapped across Hiccup's neck and he felt the fierce pressure. "Dager, please," he begged. "You know Alvin wants to split us. He must have found out and set me up." "You think?" Dager asked softly, his voice menacing. "You sure your mommy didn't beg her little boy to tell the truth?" "I told her I did tell the truth," he murmured softly. Her tears of disappointment and sorrow had almost broken his resolve, but the subsequent slaps from Alvin had erased any doubts and he had stubbornly repeated his story, despite Alvin's sneers. "No one believed me, but I didn't say anything. I swear, Dager." Dager tightened the grip. "You know, I could literally beat the crap out of your lying body." Dager threatened and Hiccup felt himself stiffen. "Yeah, that would be a shame, 'cause it would be a waste of effort," he forced himself to say. "You'd be making Al happy and not getting the right person." Dager paused, then shoved Hiccup away. "Then find out who did rat on me," Dager threatened him, his powerful arm tight around the other teen's bony shoulders. "You're my inside man, Hiccup. You find out who turned me in by the time my suspension is over or I'll have to kick the shit out of you. Nothing personal, but if there isn't anyone else to take the blame, well, can't have the rest of school thinking I'm going soft, can we?" Hiccup forced a weak smile. "Course not," he managed, his heart fluttering. "I'll find out who it was, so you can have a word with them." Dager nodded and stared pointedly at Hiccup as the boy made no move. "Well, what are you waiting for?" he asked. Hiccup's brows dipped. "Guys, I cut school to hang with you," he explained, but Dager was already shaking his head. "I think it would be better if you went back and started doing what you're told, Fishbone," he sneered to the laughter of the others. Hiccup stared at them for a long moment and turned away, heart sinking to his boots. "See ya later," he muttered as he began to walk away, head down and hands dug deep in his pockets. "Unbelievable," he sighed. "All we've been though, all those detentions, all those nights out and days hanging, and they think I would, thanks, Al," he added under his breath. "I'll get you for this." "Oh." He went to Gobbers, not school, sitting with Toothless for a long time before pulling his overalls on and helping fix a handful of minor faults, almost silent. Gobber watched him all afternoon and then pulled him aside as he was preparing to leave. "Okay, spit it out, laddie," he demanded. "Has Alvin been hittin' you again?" He shook his head. "Not even close," he muttered. "That would be preferable. Instead, the crew think I ratted them out. Al cancelled my suspension and has spread the word I rolled on Dager." Gobber's blonde unibrow dipped and he stared at the boy for a long moment. "I can see your problem, laddie," he murmured. "And your friends know ye did nae turn them in?" No," Hiccup admitted, then forced a small smile on his face. "Screw 'em. I'll manage." He slammed his locker and slung his bag over his shoulder. Course, I may just manage to get pounded into a greasy smear on the sidewalk, but hey. That's still a step up from life at home. Then he turned and walked out the door. Toothless gave a small whine and looked at Gobber. Yeah, I didn't like it either, boy, the mechanic murmured. Some friends. Oh. Astrid had gotten hold of Heather by phone at lunch and had finally got the story out of her. Her parents had been uber mad at her for getting caught, and she was pleased Astrid hadn't shared her fate. And she was very interested at the news that Snotlout and Dager had been suspended for another week for kicking the whole thing off. Her only comment was she thought Cammy was lucky not to be with them for egging the two boys on and stirring them up royally. Astrid rolled her eyes. Cammy was one of her closest friends, but she sure had a wild side and would have relished the chance to cause mayhem. And she had been the one practically dragging Heather, Ruff and Astrid to watch the contest. Heather confirmed she was back in on Thursday and commiserated with Astrid that she was alone, though Astrid did remind her that half the year had come up to ask her what had happened, so she really wasn't alone, she was just missing her besties. Heather also confirmed that Snotlout was fuming because he was missing the match but still intended to turn up at the twins' party on Saturday night, originally intended as a victory celebration but now probably just a party. Astrid had been reticent but had finally agreed, though she had been forced to lie and tell her parents that she was going to be at Heather's for the evening for a sleepover. Which wasn't entirely untrue because she would be sleeping over there after the party had finished. Of course, her parents wouldn't approve of her going to any sort of party with the Thorsten twins. Ruff was Astrid's friend, but Tough and Rough together were a force of nature, and hurricanes were felt to be less devastating. Their last party in junior year had 6 fire engines, 9 police units and the Coast Guard in attendance. And then there was the sticky issue of her grades. She was maintaining a very high standard in all her classes but 2. In math she was edging between an A and B, but in art, she was a straight C student. Even the assistance from Hiccup and the single A she had achieved couldn't overcome the drag of her mediocrity in the subject. Her dad had been predictably unhelpful. You have to improve, he had told her. But Dad, I am doing my best, I just don't have the talent, she protested. Nonsense, he told her bluntly. You are a Horferson. You will prevail. Not with a paintbrush, she grumbled. Dad, I am heading for AC. This will ruin my average. If I can drop art, I will maintain. No. Martin Horferson growled. You will speak to your teacher and get extra tuition to get you up to standard. I will not tolerate failure, or have you forgotten? If you do not graduate with a perfect or average, I will not fund your further studies. You can work out there and see what hard work really is. She took a shuddering breath and nodded. It was the same speech, the same threats every time. And she never slacked, never let up, always drove herself as hard as she could possibly go, so if she was failing, it was because she simply wasn't good enough. And there was no way she could ever pass in art with an A. I understand, sir, she murmured, knowing that what he was telling her was to get a tutor. And the only one good enough in her year to tutor her, was Hiccup. She sighed. She would stack shelves in a convenience store before she placed her future in the hands of Hiccup Haddock. Chapter 18, Just a Pest. Chapter text. It was the last day of the girls' suspensions and Astrid was cheerfully hanging with Anna and Olaf. The new students were very friendly and several others joined them to help welcome them to Berk. Astrid was in her element. The academic programs are good, sure, she admitted, but we're most proud of the football team, the Berk Vikings. Defending Archipelago Cup champions. You won for 2 of the last 3 years, Olaf added, his dark eyes sparkling. He was small and dark-haired, a little round but very friendly. Anna grinned. And you already whooped Arundel High, she noted. Any boys worth paying attention to? Only the whole team. Helga said excitedly. They're all so hot, especially Snotlout, eh, Astrid? Ah. You're welcome to him. She huffed. Is he your boyfriend? Anna asked, her green eyes wide with mischief. You are kidding, she sighed. No. He thinks he's my boyfriend, but no. He's so not my type. But if you fancy trying your luck, be my guest. Oh, Astrid is just playing hardball, Linda said airily. Everyone knows she'll be going out with him by graduation. Will not, she said hotly. Ah. There isn't enough room in a relationship for him and his ego, let alone anyone else. What about Irette? Birgit asked, adopting a dreamy expression. Ruff may have something to say about that. Astrid smirked. It was no secret that her friend had a massive crush on Irette, though Irette had spent a lot of time trying to avoid the female twin who he seemed completely repelled by. Astrid privately viewed Irette as the most eligible of the football team, hardworking, handsome and polite, except he, like the rest, had an ego the size of a planet. Of the others, Tuff was officially crazy and was so similar to Ruff that it would be weird to even contemplate going out with him. Fishlegs was nerdy and a bit too timid for her taste, and Snotlout was yuck. Just yuck. And Dager and his gang were unthinkable. She sighed. I heard Irette was eyeing Louisa Skarsgård. Helga murmured. Oh, don't say that aloud, Astrid advised her urgently. Especially not in Ruff's hearing. The last girl Irette got interested in woke up bald with a tattoo on her shoulder reading Skank. What? Anna asked, astonished. The twins' family all worship Loki. Jadon added, joining the group. Pretty much every prank round here is down to the twins. Or hiccup Haddock, Birgit added scornfully. Except his aren't funny, just stupid. I've heard that name whispered a lot. Anna frowned. Astrid looked up and realized she hadn't seen him since he walked in just before the bell for first class. He's tall, skinny, auburn hair and green eyes, she said. He doesn't care, totally sarcastic, and hangs with the worst crowd, Dager and his bad boy crew. But everyone says he turned in Dager and Snotlout to the principal, Olaf pointed out. Don't believe it, Astrid said firmly. Hey, he's been with Dager since freshman year. Why would he turn him in when there's nothing in it for him? He's failing half his classes, he'll be lucky to graduate, and he's more or less on permanent detention. But he never ducks responsibility for what he's done. He always stands up, and usually makes some stupid comment as well. Sounds like a nightmare, Anna agreed. Just a pest, Astrid sighed, rising to her feet. Catch ya later. I need to talk with Miss Sylvester before the next class. She smiled and waved as she walked off, her face determined. She needed to pass the art class, and first move was to speak with the teacher. Oh. Hiccup was sitting outside Alvin's office again. He had gone straight to his room once he got home, and Alvin had ignored him the previous night, and this morning, he had ordered the boy to come to see him. But this time, Hiccup didn't mind, because he had a plan. Before that, he had to make sure Alvin didn't cause him any more trouble. Marcia jerked her head when he was called in, and he offered her a small smile, but she blanked him. He sighed. Sometimes, it would be nice to be treated like a normal student, not public enemy number one. And the joke was that Hiccup's sarcasm and defiance was nothing compared to people like Dager and Savage, who were threatening, violent and downright nasty. Compared to them, Hiccup was just a smart-mouthed loser. But when he put his mind to it, he was also smart and inventive. Alvin was sitting at his desk, and Hiccup slouched his way to the chair, sitting unbidden and staring defiantly at the principal. Alvin inspected him with a scowl. You left school yesterday, he growled. And? Hiccup asked him insolently. You owe me more detention, he growled. You know, I'll just pencil my school finishing time an hour after everyone else's for the rest of the year, he said casually. Unless you wanna start me on Saturday morning detention. Alvin's face went puce. If you think I'm going to let you off your chores so you can sit doing nothing all day, you're mistaken. Alvin growled. I got better things to do with me time. Is that all? Hiccup asked, rising to his feet. Alvin lurched up as well. Are you cheeking me? He growled. Hiccup stared into his eyes. You set me up, he said coldly. What the hell do you think? But as Alvin lurched towards him, he faced him boldly. And do you think people won't notice if I leave here covered in bruises? I think no one cares, Hiccup. Alvin sneered. All your fellow students won't give you the time of day. I think your friends are after you. And if you cross me, boy, I'll make your life even more uncomfortable. Are you for real, Al? Hiccup asked him insolently. Who the hell do you think you are? Alvin punched him, the blow to his middle crushing the air from his lean shape and dropping him to his knees. Alvin grabbed his arm painfully tightly, his fingers deliberately bruising the flesh underneath. I think I'm your father, hiccup, he growled. And we'll continue this talk when we get home. He jerked the boy to his feet. Now get out. He shoved the boy towards the door and hiccup grimaced, then walked out, slamming the door behind him. But he paused and glared at the door, and as he stood there, he flicked the screwdriver out of his sleeve that he had borrowed from Gobber. In a few seconds, he had unscrewed the handle off the outside of the door and broken the mechanism, then gently slid the unscrewed cover back in place. I'd like to see you get out of that, he murmured. He was still sore and angry when he arrived in art, murmuring apologies of this late arrival and taking his usual seat at the back. Miss Sylvester nodded and continued explaining their task before moving towards the boy. With a sigh, he grabbed his book. I'm sorry, I was with Mr. Treacher, he repeated, and her eyes softened in sympathy, nodding. He mentioned he wanted to see you, hiccup, she said gently. I had hoped to catch you before class, but I need to ask you something now. His green gaze flicked up to meet hers. That doesn't sound good, he noted warily, but she was smiling. Actually, I was hoping you would help, she told him. I have received a request for additional tuition and I am unable to give the time to help this student. And I wondered if you would be willing to assist this student. His eyes widened. The conversation seemed surreal because he was hiccup not good enough at anything to be considered able to help anyone. Are you sure you're taking to the right person, he asked, and she nodded. Absolutely, she reassured him. Now if you would be willing to assist Miss Horferson. He leapt to his feet, his eyes suddenly blazing with anger. Is this a joke, he hissed. You want me to help her? Why the hell would want to do that? The anger in H's voice was very real. Miss Sylvester's face hardened slightly. Because she has requested it, she said. And I am asking you. No, he snapped. Hell will freeze over. I'm not going to help that self-centered bitch. Tried it before and all I get is sneers and being blanked. She thinks I'm useless, so I will be to her. No. I have to say I'm disappointed, Miss Sylvester began, but he turned on her in a rage. Why, he snapped at her. How stupid are you anyway? She started this year trying to get me thrown out of this class. I have already helped her once, you know the only A she got. Definitely not her own work. And after that, well, she still treats me like shit. So no. She can fail on her own and maybe then she'll learn what it feels like not be Miss Frickin' Perfect. And I'll be there laughing. Apologize right now. The teacher began, but he stood his ground, his emerald gaze still flashing in fury. No. And you should never have even asked me, he shouted at her. Hiccup. Leave the class now, she ordered him calmly. I will permit you to return when you apologize to me and to the rest of the students, including Miss Horferson. Never, he snapped, grabbing his bag and shoving past her, swatting a jar of water aside and splashing 2 other students' work. You can all go to hell. And with a slam he was gone. Chapter 19, Nowhere. Chapter text. He'd remained angry all the way to the bleachers out in the cold before the magnitude of what had happened hit him. The only teacher who supported him, the only class he actually enjoyed, lost in a few moments of anger because he was still boiling from seeing Alvin. He swallowed and stared back at the school. Even the sight of Alvin squeezing his huge bulk out through the window of his office didn't lift his spirits. Because he had lost so much more. He buried his face in his hands and breathed deeply, trying to calm himself before running his fingers through his hair. Without art, he had nothing worth attending school for. And he wouldn't be able to get away and rescue his mom, unless he quit school, worked every hour owed and sent doing whatever he could to afford the tiniest apartment in Burke which he could offer to his mom. But by then, Alvin would have turned her against him and he would be all alone. He stared across the field, seeing a freshman class head out on a run and sighed. He would prefer to leave school again, but first, he needed to find out who told Alvin who had started the fight, before Dager made good his threats. Then he pulled out his phone and rang his mother. She had been coughing a lot during the morning. After 2 rings, she picked up. Hey, Mom, how are you? He asked gently. There was a pause and he heard a muffled cough. Hiccup. I'm fine, darling, cough just fine, she said, her voice hoarse. He sighed. Mom, you're not, he said gently, his worry making his stomach flutter. He could hear the roughness in her voice. Look, I've got a couple of free classes, so tell ya what. I'll phone Dr. Bjornstrom and we'll get you checked out this afternoon. I'm fine, darling, she insisted. I'm making the call, Mom, then I'm coming home to collect you, he told her firmly. There was a pause. Darling, you shouldn't waste your school time. Mom, nothing's as important as you are, he told her. See ya soon. Then he called her MD and made an appointment, making sure to carefully check the cost of the appointment and any tests and prescriptions. He had already reached the car park by the time he had finished and paused by Alvin's car, glancing around, then cautiously prizing off one of the tail lights and breaking the bulbs. He carefully reattached the cover and smiled as he walked away. He made it home with a significant portion of his savings in his pocket and found his mother sitting at the table. She was looking pale and thinner, her voice raspy from the cough. Her dull green eyes brightened as saw him and he raced to her, horribly guilty that he hadn't properly seen her for a few days because of his own troubles. Dumping his bag, he hugged her fiercely and felt her arms tighten around him. He could feel the bones through his hug and immediately felt concerned. When she coughed, it shook her whole body. The taxi's arriving in 5 minutes, he told her gently. I'll get your coat, Mom. You really don't need to. She began, but he turned to face her, taking her hands in his and locking his green eyes with hers. Mom, I don't have an MD and I can see you're not well, he told her gently. Please, it would make me feel a whole lot better if you would see the doctor, just to check you out. Please. She swallowed and coughed again. Only if you try to get on better with your father, she said determinedly, and he bit back the instinctive response. Hating himself, he nodded. I will for you, he sighed, and she smiled. All I want cough is for you two to get along, she sighed. But you must come now, he said quietly and fetched her coat, then led her out to the waiting taxi. Every time she coughed, he watched her closely, seeing her body shake, and he found her hand, holding it tenderly. For a moment, she smiled and his mom was back, but then she hunched up again, coughing. He watched her worriedly as they pulled up by the offices and he led her in. He insisted on coming in with her to the doctor, sitting worriedly by her and listening as she owned up to how long her symptoms had been going on for, the pains she had never owned, the weight loss even she acknowledged, and he watched the physician scribble the details down. Dr. Bjornstrom was a sandy-haired man with kind hazel eyes, and he listened to Valka carefully, then asked Hiccup to wait outside while he examined her. Finally, he came to his verdict. You should have come to see me as soon as you became unwell, he scolded her lightly. I'll need a radiograph and you need a course of antibiotics. She gave a weak smile. I hadn't realized, she murmured. My husband reassured me I was getting better. Mrs. Treacher, I think it's plain that you are not improving, he said sternly. You need rest, antibiotics and warmth. I am glad I have seen you today. Now we'll perform your radiograph. Hiccup waited as she had the test, various blood tests as well, and then was issued a prescription. Finally, once his mother was given a list of strict do's and don'ts, he attended the desk and paid the bill, taking almost all the money he had taken out. There was just enough for the taxi home, so he took her home, cursing himself that he couldn't afford to treat her a meal as he had planned, because he just didn't have enough money. Once home, he made sure she took her meds, then put her to bed, watching over her until she went to sleep. And then he grabbed his bag and slowly walked to the forge. Gobber greeted him with a concerned expression. What are you doing here, laddie? He asked, wiping his face and swearing grease all across his big furrowed brow. Hiccup sighed, opening his locker and stowing his bank card again. I think we both know the answer is not attending school, he said sarcastically. He slammed the locker closed. Mom's ill. Gobber frowned and inspected the boy in front of him. Most of the time, he managed to maintain a really good front, but Gobber could tell he was really worried. How bad? He asked. Stoic had been his best friend and he had been the best man at Stoic and Valka's wedding. He knew the boy had promised to protect her and that his ability to do so was limited. Her new husband. Bad infection, he sighed. She's on the right meds now, but if Al finds out, he may stop her taking them. I made her promise to take them, if I promised to get along with him. His expression said it all. And she does know he beats your, he asked. There was a stiff pause. Yes, he said quietly. She knows. But, I think she's scared, Gobber. Scared that if she angers him, he'll hurt her or me or both. Scared that he'll throw us out and we'll be penniless. Scared that I will leave her alone and leave Burke and she'll have nothing. The mechanic stared at the boy and saw him sag. So what'll ye do, lad, he asked. Hiccup stiffened and then gave a sigh. What I promised, he said in a low voice. But no one made Alvin promise, so I may not be around so much, because I have no idea what he'll do when he finds out I took her to the doctor. But I need this job, Gobber. Gods, I couldn't need it more. Don't worry, laddie, he said. Your job's here as long as you'll need it. Then he threw a huge hug around the lean shape and Hiccup hugged him for a long moment. Your dad would be proud of ye. Hiccup flinched. He'd be ashamed I allowed it to happen, he murmured. But I'm not stoic the vast. I can't stop Alvin, I can only try and protect Mom from him. Laddie, if ever need help, if you are in danger, call me. Gobber promised him and his green eyes showed his gratitude. I will always come. Hiccup pulled away with reluctance and turned to the door, dropping to a knee by Toothless, who licked him solemnly. Thanks, Gobber, and keep an eye on Toothless, will you? He asked softly. The mechanic nodded as the boy rose, waved and then headed out. And though he really didn't want to, he headed back to the school. Alvin was waiting for him, his dark eyes calculating as the tall shape walked into the building just in time for detention. As soon as he cleared the door, the principal grabbed his arm and dragged him towards the detention room, but the boy struggled slightly and the man stopped, glaring at the defiant shape. Where have you been? Alvin growled. Hiccup took a deep breath, accepting that whatever he said he was in trouble. So he may as well say nothing. He just hoped his mom would feel better soon. Where? Alvin snarled. Nowhere, he said. Chapter 20, Party Night. Chapter text. Saturday came swiftly and Astrid had mixed feelings. It was the day of the twins' party and she was heading over to Heather's to change and get ready mid-afternoon, and then they and Cammy would all go together to the twins' home for 7. Her parents kissed her and she headed out cheerfully, looking forward to having some fun. Sure, they tended to be loud and always crowded, but the entire class would attend and no one in their right mind would miss a twins' party. Of course, it would be slightly muted because the football team, as feared, had lost to Meathead, though only by 2 points, mainly due to awesome displays by Rhett and Thuggery, with Tuff also making his mark. It meant that Burke wasn't out of the cup by any means, since they could still make the playoffs if they won the return match on Meathead. The cheerleaders had definitely done their best and the team had responded, so Astrid was exhausted but satisfied she had done her bit. Over at Heather's, they changed and Astrid had checked herself in the mirror. Her dress was a very form-fitting bright red, reaching mid-thigh with strappy high heels. Her golden hair was braided over her left shoulder and a thin chain with a little golden axe hung round her neck. She had a white woolen shawl which wrapped around her and looked over at Heather, who was wearing a strappy emerald dress, and Cammy, who was in a deep blue shift mini dress. All had very high heels and were looking eager to go. Cammy's wild hair was twisted into an elegant knot and she was grinning wildly. Girls, this is going to be fun, she reminded them excitedly. We're queens of senior year. Heather grinned and Astrid managed a weak smile. She was looking forward to the party, but she just wanted a good time and really didn't want to attract attention. She wasn't supposed to be at the party, after all, and she was just hoping the police wouldn't be called again. Heather's mom took pictures and then gave them a lift to the end of the street, then drove away, reminding them she would come to collect them if they wanted. The girls giggled, huddled close to Astrid and her shawl in the cold air, and teetered to the party. The place was already heaving, music blasting into the house and students spilling out onto the front garden, laughing and drinking from paper cups. Strings of lights hung from every tree and bush, and the door and windows were wide open, with no one monitoring who's going in or out. The girls wove their way up the drive and slid inside, where it was warm and even louder. The hall was crammed with students, talking in huddles, drinking and giggling, and a few jumping around and dancing. After a careful search, they found Rough and Tough in the main living room, dancing wildly. But the female twin waved wildly as she saw her friends spraying her brother with beer and barged her way through to throw a huge and mildly drunken hug round all three. "My sisters," she announced happily. "Glad you made it." "Especially you, Ast. Thought you wouldn't be able to make it." I wouldn't have missed it for the world, she grinned. Is that alcohol? Beer. Ruff grinned, waving to her brother. Tuff flipped her off, so she steered the girls to a table of paper cups and sloshed beer into 4, handing them to the girls and taking one herself. To us. They all drank and Ruff wrapped an arm around Astrid. I'll take your shawl, sister, she grinned and grabbed it, leaving the girl a little self-conscious as she vanished, dropping it into the pantry, then reappearing. Tuff. Put some proper music on. As the song changed, the room erupted and the girls joined in as everyone began to dance, laughing and singing, arms waving in the air. As the evening carried on, Astrid began to relax, enjoying dancing with her friends, eating a few of the mini pizza snacks that the twins had provided, supplemented by 20 actual large pizzas, and drinking a few more beers. And then she heard a voice that had her groaning as she turned. Hey, babe. Snotlout said, elbowing his way through the heaving throng toward the dancing blonde. The stocky boy swaggered up, completely unself-conscious and oblivious to the utter lack of enthusiasm at his arrival. Glad I'm here. No. Astrid sighed. I was having a good time. And you can have a better one, now I'm here, he said, grabbing her wrist and hauling her towards him for a slobbery kiss. She rammed her knee into his middle and he exhaled with an oof. Get off me, Snotfis, she snapped, shoving him away. You should be grateful for me, he told her. Don't see anyone else offering to dance with you, babe. I'm dancing with my friends, Snot, she protested. Just go and have fun with yours. He waggled an eyebrow. I thought I was your friend, he said in a puppyish voice. She pulled a face. Snot, unless you start wearing a dress. Please don't start wearing a dress, you aren't one of my girlfriends, so go and chat to Tuff, she sighed. Yeah, he'll be glad to see ya. Ruff grinned, swaying to the music. I think he wants his guys with him. Especially his star quarterback. Snot preened. Yeah, heard they did good without me, he said approvingly. Of course, not good enough, but hey. I'll be back next time. And we'll kick Meathead's butt. Astrid bit her lip. It was very tempting to point out that he was only missing because he was suspended, as he had been stupid enough to get baited by Dager and get involved in stupid brawl. Though he would have been back at school if she hadn't accidentally told Mr. Treacher that he and Dager had caused the brawl, not Hiccup Haddock. And then she shook her head. Why had she done that? It wasn't as if she liked him, but she was trying to be fair to him because he had gotten her out of there without getting caught and she had known he didn't deserve the suspension. And her good deed in getting him off had damaged the school. And he had still thrown it in her face by refusing to tutor her and had shouted at her and Miss Sylvester. And he still hadn't apologized to either of them. So though she knew morally she should own up and get him off the hook, she was sore enough to keep her silence about the fact he was being blamed for something she had innocently done. She started as Heather touched her shoulder. You okay? The black-haired girl asked, her green eyes worried. Astrid gave a small smile. A bit tired, she admitted. Busy week. That's not loud. Heather smiled. Never gets the message. Astrid nodded. Rocks for brains and skin thicker than rhino hide. She admitted. But so in love with himself, Cammy added, popping up. She handed a cup to each of the girls of something she described as punch but which seemed to be alcohol, diluted with more alcohol. With a splash of even more alcohol. Astrid took a sip and coughed. Cammy, she protested and then felt Heather nudge her. Snotlout was hitting on a pretty little redhead that Astrid recognized with shock was Anna. The new girl was grinning and joking with the football player and he was visibly puffing out his chest at the attention. Yup. Starting to become a pest, she admitted, but didn't feel a single pang of jealousy. Strange. She would have thought she might, since Snotlout had been chasing her since freshman year. But she didn't actually want to go out with him, ever. I'll just have to keep pushing him away until he gets the message. Heather glanced behind her and her eyes widened in surprise. And speaking of pests, she murmured. Astrid paused, then turned, to see Dager swagger into the party, elbowing their other partygoers aside. And with him was his crew, Thuggery, Savage, Maggots, Dog's Breath, and Hiccup. What are they doing here? She murmured. Chapter 21, Unwelcome Guests. Chapter text. The noise level dropped for a moment and Dager gave a wide grin. "The party's arrived," he announced and grinned, his pale green eyes sweeping the packed room, holding up bottles of spirits. "Hey!" Tuff called, ambling forward. The male twin was athletic build but not massive, his blonde hair in long dreads and his grey-blue eyes hard. "You guys weren't invited." His eyes fell on the skinny auburn-haired shape. "Especially him." Dager gave a humorless grin and rested an arm round Hiccup's shoulders. "Hey, this guy's on my crew and we all go together," he said easily. "But I didn't invite you." Tuff protested. "Neither of us did." Ruff added, walking forward. Heather, Cammy and Astrid all walked up to support her, as did Snotlout. "No. Oh, but I think you invited the person who invited the person who invited the person who invited me," Dager pointed out. "And then I invited my boys." "You're not welcome," Tuff said firmly. "What? Not even my boys who helped our team do so well when our quarterback was so stupid to get suspended?" Dager asked. Snotlout growled and bunched his fists. "Hey! You were suspended too," Cammy growled. "But Thug and Savage weren't," Dager pointed out. "And they played. So aren't they welcome?" Tuffykins, "Wait, you are the girl, aren't you?" "Hey!" Ruff growled. "You weren't invited," Tuff insisted, which would have come out more menacing if he hadn't been drunk and swaying. "Your front door is open. Anyone can wander in and out," Hiccup pointed out. "Half the people here weren't actually invited." "Well, you certainly weren't invited," Ruff sneered. "You rolled on the team and got Snot suspended for a week." "Hey, also suspended," Dager protested. Hiccup rolled his eyes. "How many times do I have to say it?" "Never happened," Hiccup protested with a shake of the head and skull. "Not what everyone else says," Snotlout growled, his blue eyes narrowing. Dager lurched forward a step, squaring up against the other boy. "You insulting me," he growled. "No, that scrawny sneak." Snotlout growled and gestured to the scrawny teen. Hiccup glared back at him, his green eyes flashing with anger. "I would never turn you in," he growled. "You don't do that." "Oh yeah? What if I don't believe you?" Snotlout snarled as Astrid leapt between the two, her arms extended to keep the two antagonists apart. "Hey! Hey!" she snapped. "Guys! We're all here to have a good time. Park it and deal with it on Monday." She turned to look at Snotlout. "Snot! Drop it." "But I..." Snotlout protested. "I said drop it," she snapped. "Babe. I am not your babe. I just..." "Snotlout. Do you want me to tell Irette you borrow his deodorant? You wouldn't. Try me." She folded her arms and smirked. "So now he's out the way, you wanna try a real man, Astrid?" Dager asked her in a sneering voice. "I bet we could." "No," she snapped, turning back to him. "I am not going out with any of you." "Gah. Can't I just come to a party and have some fun?" Then she grabbed Heather's hand and stormed off through the double doors and onto the back patio, where she stared at the garden massively over-decorated with strings of lights, and sighed, sitting on the seat and staring into the darkness. There was a torch burning and several couples were just visible a bit further into the gloom, already eating each other's faces. Heather sat at her side, handing her another paper cup of so-called punch. Astrid took another sip and sighed. "I really thought punch was meant to have some sort of fruit component," she murmured and inspected the cup. Heather took a sip and frowned. "Traditionally," she murmured. "I mean, the nerve of those guys. They must know no one wants them here." Astrid sighed. "Look, they just come to cause trouble," she admitted. "I just don't want more fighting. We got into so much trouble last time and my parents will go stratospheric if I get caught in a raid at a Thorsten party. I just want to have a good time without some huge disaster happening," she sighed. "And now I can see this party just going the same way." "Ast, it's a twins party," Heather reminded her as they stared into the gloom. "I just hope we don't get the Coast Guard again." Astrid remembered. "Yeah, what was that all about?" she giggled, recalling the chaos that had ensued from the last party. I think Tough, or was it Hiccup Haddock, called and said there was a boat in distress at these coordinates and they came here to investigate. Heather reminded her. Astrid collapsed into giggles. I think we had gone by then when the first cops turned up, she admitted. Ruff said they were really pissed. Heather giggled. But so were the twins and pretty much everyone else here. Astrid sighed and Heather grasped her arm. You worried about your parents finding out? The blonde girl nodded, her azure eyes downcast. They mean the best, but I just feel I'm missing out so much, she sighed. I know they want me to do well and keep talking about a well-rounded portfolio, but they don't want a well-rounded daughter. They just want a little geek. Heather rubbed her arms reassuringly. Anytime you want a break, call me, she invited her. Look, you can always sleep over if you want a break, and I'll always look out for my BFF. Astrid lifted her head and smiled, then gave a nod. I'll definitely take you up on that, she grinned and got up. I fancy another dance. Coming. Heather nodded. I've got your back, Ast, she grinned. Oh. Hiccup really wasn't enjoying the party. He had been surprised when Dager had texted him and more or less ordered him to come, but he had sneaked out despite his promise to his mom and had joined up with the gang. There was an undertone, though, making him feel like an outsider, not a proper member of the crew. He knew Dager didn't believe him, and it was obvious that Snotlout blamed him as well for their extended suspension. And after 2 days, he still had no idea who had actually turned in the other, and if he couldn't find out by the time Dager returned to school, well, he might have to get suspended himself to avoid the other boy. Possibly forever. And emigrate. He had listlessly got a paper cup of something alcoholic and was drinking sparingly because he didn't trust anyone and his mates were more or less ignoring him. Everyone else was treating him like a leper and he was wondering how soon he could get out of the house and head home, if he could manage to sneak in. It was very likely Alvin would have deadlocked the doors and checked his window was locked to prevent him sneaking in. Otherwise, he might be sleeping in the shed. Fed up of being jostled, he set off through the house, seeing groups of students chatting, laughing and joking, though when he passed, he heard his name whispered like a hiss and there were eyes looking and fingers pointing. The next room was gloomy with a pounding beat and lots of bodies bouncing and grinding obscenely. It was pretty late and cold air wafted in from the open front door. He saw Dager and Cammy dancing together and he also glimpsed the hilarious sight of Irette dancing with Ruff. Well, Irette trying to escape Ruff would be more accurate. The female twin had grabbed the tall, powerful football player and though he was trying and clearly not into Ruff at all, the girl was grinding against him with a blissful expression on her face. Hey, why are you here? A voice sneered. You're not welcome. He turned to see Gustav, one of the juniors. The boy was always hanging around Snotlout, his idol, and the bad boy crew had nicknamed him Minisnot. Since this is a senior party, why are you here? Hiccup shot back. You weren't invited either. Snotlout invited me. Gustav proclaimed superiorly. Hiccup hitched up an eyebrow cynically. Really? Yeah. Well, he would have if he'd thought about it. So why are you giving me a hard time? Because you ratted Snotlout out and got him suspended for a week. Have you considered that if he hadn't been so stupid to rise to Dager, he wouldn't have been suspended at all? Hiccup asked him dryly. Oh, what am I saying? This is Snotlout we're talking about. The guy has rocks for brains. Of course he got himself suspended. So you did trade him for yourself? Gustav announced triumphantly. Hiccup grabbed his arm and hauled him to the patio. Will you shut up, he hissed. I did not. But I was there as were Irette, Fish, Tough, the rest of the crew and Miss Perfect and her friends. We all knew what idiots started the fight. But I know I didn't hand them over, so someone else must have. Funny how you were the only one who had his suspension cancelled. Gustav accused him. Yeah, it was hilarious. Hiccup snapped. Because I would want to spend more time in school. Yeah, that's gonna happen. Newsflash, Fishbone. Gustav sneered. No one believes you. Everyone thinks you cut a deal. And boy are you in trouble when Snot gets back. Hiccup turned to inspect the cold garden. The couples had moved inside as the temperature dropped and his breath was coming in small clouds as the grass began to sparkle with frost. Wow, can't wait, he sighed. What popularity. At this rate I could Burke's Most Wanted. Gustav grinned. Gonna enjoy seeing that, he sneered and vanished back into the house. Fists clenched, shoulders tense, he stared into the darkness and wished desperately that he could get his hands on the person who had landed him onto his neck in yak dung. Then he sighed. He really didn't need any more abuse today. Alvin had forced him to spend the day cleaning the yard and front drive to make up for his delinquency the previous week, and he had helped his mother with her tasks as well when Alvin went out. He'd been watched like a hawk for the last 2 days, slapped and starved, but Valka was taking her meds and she was already improving. He was exhausted, hungry and fed up, but he would endure it if his mom was getting better.